Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga. Chapter 39-21. Refining the Flame of the Human King. In Linling's dantian, the golden flame emitted endless majesty. It kept circling, dancing, and finally quietly turned into the figure of an emperor. Once this emperor appeared, everything in the world seemed to be assimilated, and Linling's body naturally could not escape this fate. Oh! An extremely majestic aura rushed into Linling's body, causing him to frown slightly. But at this moment, the three fruits floating around Linling in the three directions of heaven, earth, and human began to burn. Mysterious words floated out, forming a scene of heaven and earth, protecting Linling. Linling instantly sensed that the assimilation pressure had lessened. He also immediately knew that this was the power of the three fruits. As expected of the blessings of the gods. It was not in vain that he had spent so much effort to obtain these three fruits. And with the scene of heaven and earth evolving, Linling no longer felt any pressure. He began to try to get closer to the flame of the human king. As if it had a spirit, the flame of the human king emitted circles of golden flame halos, blocking Linling from getting closer. However, those flame halos had no effect on Linling. This was the power of the three fruits. "Now you're still arrogant," Linling shouted in his heart. His soul power controlled his consciousness to get closer, and then he controlled the flame of the human king to push it toward the space-time tablet's dantian. The dantian that belonged to the space-time tablet was originally colorful, but it gradually became golden and resplendent. A thick majesty spread out from time to time. In the end, when the flame of the human monarch completely merged with his dantian, Linling's entire body burned. It was a golden flame, but it was not an ordinary golden color. It was a golden color that carried the might of an emperor. The surrounding Dead Sea was completely burning at this moment, turning into a golden color. The entire sea seemed to be controlled by Linling. And this was the assimilation power of the human king's flame. According to legend, the most terrifying human king's flame could assimilate everything in the world, turning everything in the world into the human king's people. Rumble! Outside of Linling's body, golden flames danced and boiled, transforming into a tall Dharma idol of a human king. This Dharma idol was also golden in color and its appearance couldn't be seen clearly, but it exuded an irresistible majesty. If the masters of Shan Hall were here at this moment, they would be trembling in fear. This was because the might emanating from the Dharma idol was already at the level of a divine embryo. According to legend, only those with divine embryos could become gods. After an unknown period of time, Linling finally opened his eyes. A golden light flashed in the depths of his eyes. Divine embryo body. Linling was stunned, because he realized how terrifying the power brought about by the dantian was. He was confident that he could defeat a first-layer martial god realm expert with a golden glow even without using the innate talent merge or the flesh of the godly demon. Very strong. This was the flame of the human sovereign. Then, Linling looked around and realized that the ocean of death had turned into a golden ocean. Even the desolate trees in the ocean had changed, becoming dazzling with golden light. This was the power of assimilation. The human king's flame was the first flame that the human king had brought to the human race. Therefore, tens of thousands of people had submitted to it, including the ocean and the desolate trees. Rise! Linling let out a low roar, his voice filled with endless majesty. Rumble! Huge waves immediately rose from the ocean of death, which was controlled by Linling. It was as if the power of the ocean of death was Linling's power. The human king's flame, in addition to its powerful attack, also has such a remarkable ability. Exclamation point. Linling knew very well how terrifying assimilation was. For example, if a wisp of Linling's flame was left in a martial artist's body, the flame could immediately assimilate everything, making the martial artist submit to it. Moreover, not only the martial artist but everything in the world could submit to it. And this was the power of assimilation. What if it wasn't assimilated? Linling pointed his finger, and from the depths of his dantian, a wisp of golden flame shot out like a meteor. The golden flame quietly landed on the ground in front of him. Crackle! The ancient ground in front of him, with a radius of 10,000 miles, instantly burned. The golden flame soared into the sky, as if the human king was furious. Moreover, this flame had no sense of temperature, but anything that approached it would immediately be burned into nothingness. As expected of the human king's flame. At this moment, the giant ghost also floated back. Because the three fruits had already turned into nothingness, he no longer feared the power of the three fruits. And the way he looked at Lin Ling had also changed. It was as if the youth of the past had become a god at this moment. This was the power of a god. After the era of gods, tens of thousands of gods fell. After the era of gods, the gods that rose up became fewer and fewer. But now, there is finally a god that rose up quietly here. The giant ghost said. The giant ghost said. He could faintly see that Lin Ling would definitely become a god in the future. Lin Ling, this is the power without the fusion of talents. If you fuse them, all your talents will be led by the human king's flame, and your strength will greatly increase. The giant ghost said again. Yes, yes. In response, Lin Ling nodded heavily. After the battle with martial god Wen Tian, his confidence had increased by another level. This was because he had the divine embryo. In the ancient dragon desolate land, other than in Yuer, he was the second martial artist with such talent. Demigod divine pill. Yes. However, when he thought of the fated battle, Lin Ling did not dare to slack off. He immediately took out a pill. This pill looked extremely simple and unadorned. Those who did not know would think that it was an ordinary pill. This was because this pill did not have any pill markings, nor did it have any pill light. However, Lin Ling knew that this was a true pill from the era of gods, because it was bought from the store of gods. Demigod divine pill, formed from the will of a god. In reality, it is the condensation of a god's understanding of the grand Tao. The giant ghost also looked at the divine pill. It seemed to have heard of the demigod divine pill before. In reality, this pill was formed from the will of a god. However, to form this pill, it required 30% of a god's strength. Therefore, this pill was extremely rare. After all, no god was willing to give up 30% of their strength. Generally speaking, unless it was for their descendants, they would be willing to use this strength. Therefore, the giant ghost guessed that this was a pill prepared by the gods for their descendants. However, due to the sudden arrival of the calamity and the fall of many gods, this pill was not able to display its effects. In the end, it was passed down for countless generations and fell into Lin Ling's hands. The power of this pill increased the chances of ascending to godhood by 80%. Moreover, from the day of swallowing the pill, the martial artist would need to continuously devour heavenly treasures and accumulate them to increase their chances of ascending to godhood. The more they accumulated, the higher their chances of ascending to godhood. In the end, it would reach 80%. With one batch of pills, even the tribulation of gods would not descend. Without the tribulation of gods, and with an 80% chance of breaking through, this pill could be said to be a 100% chance of entering the martial god realm. Chapter 39:22. The 10th Day. This caused an endless amount of spiritual energy to surge into the vortex and gradually accumulate. The moment it was unsealed, this spiritual energy would become the main force to become a martial god. Upon realizing this, Lin Ling did not stop and frantically refine the Emperor Crystal. Other than the 100 million royal crystals he had left for himself, Lin Ling had used up all of his royal crystals. He had 6 stanchions, so it was 60 times more difficult for him to become a martial god than an ordinary person. One of the reasons was that Lin Ling's talent was too high. When all of the Emperor crystals were used up, Lin Ling threw a large number of treasures into the vortex. Currently, he was strong enough to fight a martial god. However, if he broke through to the martial god realm, what would his combat strength be like? Lin Ling simply did not dare to imagine. Now, I'll start to break through to the martial god realm. Once I leave the ancient dragon desolate land, I'll completely undo the pill. Lin Ling licked his lips. Next, he checked all the treasures. Mud or clothes. 2 dragon balls. Wraith Law. Lin Ling laughed excitedly. These treasures were prepared for his 4 great innate gifts. The ominous robe was the ominous robe of the gods. According to legend, it was worn by the butcher who was in charge of punishing. After tens of thousands of years, it had already accumulated an endless amount of ominous energy. As for the Dragon Balls, they were prepared for the dragon god's innate talent. As for the malevolent spirit laws, they were naturally for the malevolent spirit jellyfish's use. If I refine all of them, all of my talents will increase by 1 grade. In addition to the flame of the human king, my strength will undoubtedly increase crazily in the ancient dragon wasteland. Lin Ling hurriedly refined those treasures one by one. Unfortunately, God's store didn't have many of the treasures he needed. Otherwise, his power would have increased even more. Of course, this was enough. This was because the current Linling was completely different from when he first arrived. Boom, boom. One treasure after another was refined. First of all, the realm-swallowing beast's talent was enhanced. It reached the 6th grade, and the skin of chaos was born. This caused Linling's defense to increase by another 10%. Boom, boom. Next, the talents of the 2 dragon gods increased. The Grand Netherwind Dragon reached the 3rd grade, and the Heavenly Dragonbone reached the 5th grade. Boom, boom. The Devil Ghost Jellyfish had also stepped into the ranks of the 5th stage. His 4 great talents were enhanced at the same time, allowing Linling's strength to increase by 20,000 boundary force. His speed also increased by 2,000 boundary force. His strength soared. If it wasn't for the fact that the human king's flame was of a different attribute and was used to increase the power of one's world essence and had nothing to do with one's physical strength, Linling's strength would have risen to an even more terrifying level. After the fusion of talents, my current strength is 30,000 worlds force. Kiske. My speed is also 3,000 world speed. Linling felt power surging through his entire body. His strength was boundless. With a light flick of his finger, it was as if the myriad of worlds would collapse. I'm a triple cultivator of essence, chi, and spirit. Currently, my cultivation is about to reach the martial god realm. My physical strength has also reached a whole new level. As for my soul force, it's constantly improving. Once I reach the martial god realm, I'll be able to completely open my 7th dantian. Linling opened his eyes, full of anticipation. Then, Linling looked at the time and found that 9 days had passed unknowingly. This also surprised Linling. His breakthrough this time was incomparably fast. One should know that it was impossible for others to raise their strength by such a huge amount without at least half a year or even a year. Moreover, this was considered fast. The breakthrough in strength also depends on the timing. This time, your treasures and foundation have all met the requirements, so your breakthrough is fast. The giant ghost seemed to know what Linling was thinking and explained. However, it also revealed a rare look of anticipation. Let's see what the god's inheritance treasure is like. The god's inheritance treasure was the essence of a god's life. Perhaps everyone would be curious about what was inside it. At the mention of this, Linling's eyes instantly lit up. He immediately took out the god's inheritance treasure. However, the god's inheritance treasure was extremely strange. It wasn't a treasure, nor was it a treasury. Instead, it was a series of divine runes. Fortunately, these divine runes weren't complicated. Moreover, according to the old man in the god's shop, as long as the divine runes were drawn with world essence, it was equivalent to opening the treasury. Therefore, Linling guessed that the treasury was actually hidden in the void. The divine runes were the key to opening the void. Immediately, Linling recalled the divine runes in his heart and drew them in the sky. Rumble! The sky in front of him suddenly rumbled as if the heavens and earth were falling apart. At this moment, Linling and the giant ghost were filled with anticipation. They wondered what the treasury contained. Rumble! However, very quickly, a dull sound was heard. The crack in the void closed again, causing Linling to stare. It seems like your strength isn't enough. The giant ghost suddenly guessed something and said unhappily. Then it guessed, I estimate that you need to be at least at the martial god realm. This damn thing. Hearing this, Linling was extremely unhappy. He almost wanted to ask the martial god realm seniors of the God Slayer Alliance for help. However, after thinking about it, he gave up in the end. After all, it was better to open the god's inheritance treasure himself. Forget it. There's only 1 day left. Let's prepare to go to the Immortal Temple. Linling shook his head and smiled. Then, he left the Death Sea with the giant ghost. Far away from the Death Sea, the raging golden fire was still burning. No one dared to approach it. Instead, a figure slowly walked out from the golden flames. Beside him was an evil spirit the size of a fist. It was an extremely shocking combination. Senior Sister Yu, I've traveled all over the Kaiyuan River and finally found you. The young man had delicate features. He was wearing a long blue and white robe. His eyes were filled with excitement. And Yuer had gone missing in the 9 prefectures' 7 great forbidden lands in Qingzhou. Lin Ling had traveled thousands of mountains and rivers to search for her. However, he finally found out that an Yuer had been taken away by the Immortal Temple. At that time, Lin Ling was just an ordinary warrior in Qingzhou. Compared to the 9 prefectures' 10 perils, he was like a dim moth. However, moths were sometimes so stupid. They knew that they would die if they jumped into the fire, but they still did not shirk their duty. However, there were exceptions to everything. It was not impossible for a moth to be reborn and turn into a phoenix. After so many years, Lin Ling had finally turned into a phoenix. For this day, he had worked hard for a long time. Finally, he could personally bring home the girl he had known since he was young. You and the others have been waiting for you for a long time. The young man gradually disappeared, walking further and further away. Although the 10th day had yet to arrive, the west side of the ancient dragon wasteland was already bustling with noise. Currently, there were not many treasures left in the divine store. Moreover, there were very few golden fleece flowers left around the wasteland. Therefore, most people did not go out. If it was not for the fact that they wanted to know which hero would be able to marry the Immortal Temple's saintess and obtain her favor, they would have left long ago. The 10th day has finally arrived. At the west side of the ancient dragon wasteland, there were many people moving forward. Chapter 39-23. Slaughtering Chariots. Yeah, if it wasn't for the fact that God's store was booked, the Overlord Alliance would still be fighting. That's right, but the battle is over. Let's end it with the marriage of the Immortal Temple's saintess. Speaking of the saintess, I've seen her before. She's so beautiful, and she has a divine fetus. Whoever dual cultivates with her might become a divine fetus. TSK, becoming an expert in one step. Look, those young masters and princes are all here. How coquettish. How could those lazy young masters who don't want to cultivate miss out on this opportunity to reach the heavens in a single bound? Just a bunch of toads. The passers-by were discussing with disdain towards those young masters who wanted to reach the heavens in one step. Indeed, toads want to eat swan meat. Behind the crowd, a blue-robed young man walked forward with a bodyguard. After hearing the words of the passers-by, a mocking smile appeared on his face. He was Lin Ling. Lin Ling was surprised by an Yuer's popularity, but Lin Ling wasn't worried. Because he knew that an Yuer belonged to him, Lin Ling. Following the main road, Lin Ling discovered that there was an ancient city in front of him. Although it looked simple, it was extremely prosperous. Moreover, through the conversations of passers-by, they found out that this was built by the 7th Emperor Alliance, because the leader of this alliance believed that since they were actually marrying Immortal Temple's holy lady, then they had to be a bit more dignified. They naturally couldn't be careless about this matter in the wilderness. Although everyone knew that the 7th Emperor Alliance was purposely showing off, having a city was better than nothing. What a grand display! Lin Ling couldn't help but shake his head. The 7th Emperor Alliance wanted to build an ancient city to show their sincerity. Go! As for the main road leading to the ancient city, a large number of luxurious chariots galloped past. Some were pulled by fire cheilants while others were pulled by magnificent puppets. As for the chariots, they were also magnificent. Clearly, the people sitting inside were extremely noble, as if they were above the masses. Lin Ling watched the chariots pass by with a disdainful smile. These famous young masters were like nouveau riches. Did they think that they could marry an Yuer just because they had a luxurious chariot? One had to know that Lin Ling could easily get tens of thousands of chariots like the ones from before. In terms of extravagance, Lin Ling would say that he was number 1. No one would dare to say they were number 2. However, Lin Ling's extravagance is present. You get out of my way! Go! At this moment, a platinum chariot rushed over from behind. The one pulling the chariot was actually a dragon. A real dragon. However, this dragon's was its aura, it was an evil dragon. Perhaps because it had been enslaved for too long, its eyes were filled with hostility. Using an evil dragon comparable to a martial god to pull his chariot, this person is quite heroic. Wow! The passers-by were startled and quickly made way. They knew that this person's background was not small. Roar! The evil dragon galloped forward, stirring up endless clouds and winds. Hey, why are you still here? Do you want to die? However, someone noticed that there were 2 people in front of the road who didn't give way.
One was a burly man in a cloak and the other was a young man in a blue robe. Not only did the young man in blue not give way, he even stopped and frowned at the incoming dragon. Since he was in the middle of the road, one could easily imagine his fate.
Using a dragon to pull a chariot. The person in the middle of the road was Lin Ling. He didn't dislike the owner of the chariot, but he could sense the unyielding spirit of the evil dragon. This evil dragon had clearly been enslaved for a long time. However, a dragon roamed the 9 heavens. A true dragon wanted to roam the 9 heavens and not be enslaved. Lin Ling had the talent of the dragon god. Seeing the dragon being enslaved, he immediately felt uncomfortable.
"You're courting death, get lost."
At this moment, an angry shout came from the chariot. An old man pointed at Lin Ling and cursed. "I am young Master Windchaser. I have a name list and I want to marry the immortal temple's saintess. A mere toad dares to block my way?" After the old man's voice, another shout came. As if he was afraid that others didn't know who he was, his voice was extremely loud. "A name list?" Hearing this, many people's expressions changed slightly. There are many people who want to marry the immortal temple's saintess. Therefore, only those with a name list have the qualifications to go to the immortal temple. Those with a name list all have great backgrounds. An old man frowned and said, "Compared to this, is that kid stupid? He's still in a daze." However, someone else spoke. This was because the blue-robed youth still didn't leave. He stood there foolishly. At this moment, many people couldn't bear to watch any longer. They thought that the blue-robed youth would be trampled into meat paste. However, at this moment, the rampaging dragon suddenly roared and stopped abruptly. It was less than 5 meters away from the youth. The strong wind blew the blue-robed youth's long hair. However, the blue-robed youth remained unmoved like a mountain. At this moment, Lin Ling also looked at the evil dragon in front of him indifferently. The evil dragon was also staring at Lin Ling, but its eyes, which were full of hostility, quietly changed into a look of reverence. "I'll return you your freedom." Lin Ling also understood the meaning in the depths of the evil dragon's eyes. Then his sword flashed. Clang! The chains that bound the evil dragon were actually cut off by a single slash. One had to know that this was a chain that could bind the martial god. Everyone was shocked. Then they saw the youth say indifferently, "You leave." Roar! The dragon seemed to be very obedient to the youth. It soared into the sky like a flying dragon and immediately flew into the distance. In the end, it disappeared without a trace. The entire road immediately fell silent. Many people stared at Lin Ling and frowned. This was because not only did Lin Ling make the dragon stop, he even seemed to be able to command the dragon. This was somewhat inconceivable. "Do you have a death wish? How dare you let go of my mount? I'll make you my mount." At this moment, a loud curse came from the luxurious war chariot. Clang! However, as soon as the words were spoken, a sword slashed. Rumble! The magnificent war chariot was instantly cut into 2 halves by the sword. Then, several figures in a sorry state rolled out of the war chariot. It was an extremely comical sight. Cutting a chariot in half? That blue-robed youth was too arrogant. Everyone's eyes narrowed. This was because they knew that those who had a name list would definitely have an extraordinary background. Now, cutting their chariot in half was a provocation. "Sir, are you all right? Sir, do you have a death wish?" Soon, the old man from the battlefield helped a youth up. He then looked coldly at Lin Ling and said. Lin Ling looked at them indifferently. His expression was as calm as an ancient well. Coupled with a long sword in his hand, he looked like a lonely swordsman. Chapter 39-24. The Unrestrained Sword Alliance. "Sir, we are people with a name list. May I ask which overlord you belong to and who is backing you?" The old man said after calming the young man down. "Master Tai, teach him a lesson. Oh my God, my war chariot was given to me by my brother." However, the young man was not as calm as the old man. He pointed at Lin Ling and scolded him. "I am alone. I don't have any overlord backing me." Lin Ling's gaze fell on the name list in the young man's hand. Speaking of which, he did not seem to have a name list with him. "Of course, if I had one, I would have a lot of underlings." Lin Ling walked forward step by step. "So arrogant even though you don't have anyone backing you? Kid, You seem to have done something you shouldn't have.
After hearing Lin Ling's words, the old man's face turned cold. The worry in his heart disappeared completely. His white hair suddenly stood up, his fangs grew out, and his face turned green. Green-faced ghost Tai Cheng. Someone immediately recognized that old monster. That was a martial god expert. Bang! The old man did not say anything and immediately pounced on Lin Ling.
His speed was extremely fast. From afar, he looked like an evil ghost pouncing on him. The underworld's evil ghost talent?
Looking at the old man pouncing on him, Lin Ling suddenly smiled.
He did not expect to meet someone with the same talent as him. Boom! Lin Ling did not hold back. Countless evil ghosts flew out from his chest like jellyfish lanterns. Once this talent appeared, the evil ghost talent of the green-faced ghost was no longer affected by Lin Ling. The green-faced ghost was also shocked. An evil ghost's innate talent? He thought that his talent was very rare. Who knew that this mysterious swordsman also had it? The ghost talent has always been known for its craftiness. You underestimate me. The green-faced ghost sneered and continued to pounce on Lin Ling. However, it suddenly disappeared and reappeared behind Lin Ling. A giant green-faced demon head bit at Lin Ling with a ferocious aura and glinting fangs. The terrifying attack could easily devour 80% of the half-martial gods. You're still too inexperienced to play tricks in front of me. Unfortunately, with Lin Ling's strength, he naturally noticed this change. He didn't even look behind him and continued to walk forward with large strides.
Almost at the same time, the golden white evil spirit, who had been standing behind Lin Ling, reached out with its hand.
Rumble! With this grab, green lightning erupted from the green-faced ghost. However, the golden white ghost wasn't afraid at all. Upon closer inspection, it was actually wearing a pair of gloves. Nether Thunder gloves. Tesese. This is a divine weapon-type treasure. Someone recognized the gloves and said enviously. As for the golden white evil ghost's arm, it easily grabbed the old man's head, causing him to be unable to move at all.
On the other hand, Lin Ling had already arrived in front of the young man and was looking down at him. The young man had been extremely arrogant. However, after witnessing Master Tai being defeated with his own eyes, he was so scared that he didn't dare to move.
Give it to me, Lin Ling said calmly. Give what? The young man was anxious.
However, when he saw Lin Ling looking at the list in his hand, he immediately handed it over.
After Lin Ling received it, he slowly put it away. However, he didn't leave. Instead, he looked into the distance. This was because a large number of experts were approaching from afar. Upon closer inspection, there were at least 10,000 of them. Of course, apart from Lin Ling, the others also noticed this change. That looks like the Natural Sword Alliance. Someone exclaimed in shock.
My lord, I'm here.
As for the young man who was too scared to move, he also noticed the reinforcements in the distance. He immediately acted as if he had seen a life-saving straw. Then he glared at Lin Ling fiercely and said, You're dead. Today, the Natural Sword Alliance is here. Even the martial god is here. You destroyed my chariot. You're dead. At the end of his sentence, he was undoubtedly agitated. This was because he didn't expect to meet the Natural Sword Alliance. More importantly, he was a member of the Natural Sword Alliance. Sir, what do you mean by this? You let go of our mounts and destroyed our chariot. Are you provoking the Natural Sword Alliance? At this moment, a figure flew over. He held a green bamboo sword in his hand and was as graceful as an immortal. Soon, he landed on the ground. Brother! The young man from before even shouted at that person. The person nodded and looked at Lin Ling. Which overlord do you belong to? Obviously, he had also guessed that this person was so arrogant. He was afraid that he had some background. Moreover, this person was still calm when he saw the Natural Sword Alliance. Therefore, unless this person was a fool, he had absolute confidence in himself. That's right. I'm the one who let go of your mounts and destroyed your chariot. Oh right, I also stole your name list. What do you think? Lin Ling looked at him calmly and nodded. Yes, sir. He admitted it directly. However, in the eyes of the people of the Natural Sword Alliance, this nod was undoubtedly ignoring them. Arrogant. Too arrogant. Unfortunately, They didn't know that Lin Ling was the #1 leader of the God Slayer Alliance. Therefore, he didn't need to lower his head when facing the Natural Sword Alliance.
Moreover, the Natural Sword Alliance was in the wrong first.
They drove the chariot recklessly. If Lin Ling wasn't strong enough, he would have been killed. Therefore, Lin Ling destroyed the chariot. This was already giving them face. If it had been someone else from the God Slayer Alliance, they might have even killed him. Good, good, good. So, you insist on going against the Natural Sword Alliance? Fine, I'll fulfill your wish. That person was so angry that he laughed. Obviously, he didn't expect Lin Ling to be so arrogant. He even thought that Lin Ling was joking.
However, Lin Ling's serious face told him that this wasn't a joke. My lord has given the order.
Stop. However, just as that person was about to explode, a dignified voice suddenly sounded. Then the crowd was separated.
A middle-aged man in ordinary clothes walked out slowly with a long sword hanging at his waist.
His temperament was simple and unsophisticated. His every move gave people the feeling that he was like a green mountain and clear water. That's the Natural Sword Martial God. However, when people stared at the middle-aged man, their expressions changed drastically. The 9 provinces' 10 martial gods. They didn't expect that the matter of the immortal temple saintess would attract the 10 martial gods. The Natural Sword Martial God stopped walking quickly. He put his hands behind his back and looked at Lin Ling indifferently. Similarly, Lin Ling looked at him indifferently. In an instant, an indescribable aura filled the air as if the sword auras of 2 peerless swordsmen were colliding. This invisible pressure made the experts at the peak of the martial ancestor realm feel like they were suffocating. Even the experts at the half-step martial god realm found it difficult to breathe. The people of the Natural Sword Alliance were laughing coldly at this moment. Chapter 39-25. A clash between 2 swordsmen. The prestige of the 10 great martial gods was unquestionable. In fact, based on Lin Ling's previous actions, not to mention the unrestrained Sword Alliance, even the passers-by felt that Lin Ling was doomed. You stole my name list? Finally, the unrestrained sword martial god spoke. His voice was calm as if he was talking to a friend. However, he did recognize Lin Ling because he had witnessed how powerful Lin Ling was during the battle at the mine not long ago. In the end, he had even seen Lin Ling being taken away by the heavenly voice of God. He still remembered that he had angered a Yuan venerate martial god to death. However, he didn't expect to meet Lin Ling here. Moreover, Lin Ling actually snatched his subordinates' name list right in front of him. He had no choice but to show up. They wanted to hit me, so I wanted to teach them a lesson and collect some interest. That's why I took his name. Lin Ling nodded calmly. He knew that the unrestrained sword martial god was not angry on the surface, but in reality, a terrifying aura was surging toward him. Because the tyrannical song sword in his hand was slightly vibrating. He was provoked by the unrestrained sword martial god's sword. However, it was also because of this that tyrannical singing sword's arrogance was ignited. Even if a swordsman's strength was weaker than others, he would never be afraid of an enemy. Hee hee. The easygoing sword martial deity suddenly smiled and said, Fine, since we are acquaintances, apologize and I will let bygones be bygones. He could clearly sense that the current Lin Ling was more than twice as strong as before. Furthermore, this was only his superficial probing. He couldn't see through the depths. However, as soon as he finished speaking, everyone's expression changed greatly. Let bygones be bygones? The unfettered sword martial god was too easy to talk to. Do you think it's possible? However, Lin Ling shook his head. Courting death. When they heard these words, not only were the people of the Free Sword Alliance cursing inwardly, even the bystanders were cursing loudly. After stealing someone else's name list, they actually dared to use such a tone to speak. Wasn't this just courting death? The unfettered sword martial god instantly frowned. He had not expected that Lin Ling would not give him any face. Have you ever seen a swordsman let go of his things after being robbed? Unrestrained sword martial god's voice became gloomy. A gentle wind started blowing in the surroundings, but when it landed on the ground, sword scars immediately appeared. That terrifying aura made everyone take a step back immediately, afraid that they would be caught in the crossfire. Have you ever seen a swordsman surrender and admit his mistake after being provoked? But Lin Ling was tit for tat. Clang! As soon as these words fell, the sword world finally erupted.
The sword at the waist of the unfettered sword martial god was quietly unsheathed, and when it was only halfway out, the sharp sword light caused everyone to close their eyes. Because the sword world's sharpness was too strong. In the eyes of many, this was a matchless showdown between swordsmen. Of course, it was still the blue-robed young man that caused everyone to be surprised. Never had they imagined that such a weak fellow would actually be so arrogant and not retreat in the slightest, and he even dared to compete with the sword martial god.
Clang! And that was indeed the case. Behind Lin Ling, the true inheritance nether swords were unsheathed. They were also halfway out. A great battle between swordsmen was about to break out. The eyes of the unfettered sword martial god flickered. Not only was he not angry, but an imperceptible light of admiration flickered in his eyes. In fact, during the battle in Fengdu City, he had already greatly admired Lin Ling. Because Lin Ling had the temperament of a true swordsman. This kind of swordsman was like a sword. Then the unfettered sword martial god thought about the matter of the heavenly sound of God, and then he thought about the mysterious aura on Lin Ling's body. Finally, he slowly withdrew his sword. Forget it, seeing that you are still young, I will not argue with you. After the sword was withdrawn, the suffocating sword whirled from before instantly disappeared. Seeing that you are old, I will spare you this time. Seeing this, Lin Ling smiled faintly and withdrew his true inheritance nether swords. Although he was currently no match for the top 10 martial gods of the 9 prefectures, in terms of trump cards, he was not afraid of the top 10 martial gods of the 9 prefectures. Therefore, he was not afraid of the unfettered sword martial god. Ha ha! Hearing Lin Ling's words, the unfettered sword martial god could not help but laugh out loud. I have learned of your sharp tongue once again. Are you going to the divine temple? If you are going the same way, let's go together. As you wish. Lin Ling nodded his head. Then, the unfettered sword martial god walked forward with a smile and walked side by side with Lin Ling towards the ancient city. When the people saw the two figures, they were all stunned. What is going on? Especially the young man whose name was snatched away by Lin Ling. He almost rubbed his eyes out. What did he just see? He saw that guy snatching the name of the unfettered sword alliance and directly provoking the martial god. In the end, he was safe and sound. This must be fake. Previously, the martial god had already fought with that young man. However, we do not understand this kind of move. Only a true swordsman would understand. That young man in the blue robe is not simple. However, in the unfettered sword alliance, an old man said solemnly. A battle between swordsmen was different from an ordinary martial artist. Sometimes, they would only use one sword, and sometimes, they would not even use their sword. Only they knew who would win and who would lose. However, that young man is quite calm. Look, he is walking together with a martial god and can actually talk cheerfully. Just based on this point alone, we can't do it. Another old man spoke up. This caused many people in the unfettered sword alliance to look forward. On the main road, Lin Ling and the unfettered sword martial god were almost putting their arms around each other's shoulders. At this moment, many young swordsmen in the unfettered sword alliance were jealous because it was a great honor to be able to walk together with the unfettered sword martial god. Hee, didn't you leave with the heavenly voice of God? Why did you come to the ancient dragon wasteland? In front of the main road, the unfettered sword martial god followed Lin Ling forward. The more they talked, the more he put down his arrogance. It was as if the young man in the blue robe beside him was not a junior but a peer. Most importantly, he realized that Lin Ling's calmness was not an act, but a pride that came from the depths of his bones. If he did not know him, he would have thought that Lin Ling was the leader of an overlord. I've been here for a long time, but I've been collecting golden fleece flower. Lin Ling curled his lips. However, I bought some treasures some time ago, so I'm finally free. Oh, you bought treasures? Not simple. I also went to buy treasures some time ago. However, all the treasures have been bought by that bastard Duan Wuhan, causing me to return empty-handed. If that guy has the chance, I'll definitely teach him a lesson. Speaking of God's shop, the unfettered sword martial god immediately cursed. Hearing this, the corners of Lin Ling's eyes twitched. Duan Wuhan? It doesn't seem to have anything to do with him. Senior unfettered sword, may I know what treasures you are looking for? Star Sacred Stone. I've been using this sword for many years. The last time I clashed with a Yuan venerate martial god, a crack was created. Therefore, I wanted to reforge it. Unfortunately, the star-sacred stone tablet was snatched away by that bastard Duan Wuhan. Chapter 39:26. A Wedding Banquet. Here, take it. However, before the long sigh ended, Lin Ling had already thrown out a multicolored divine stone, making the unrestrained sword martial god subconsciously catch it. Then when he took a look, his old eyes almost popped out. Because if it wasn't a star divine stone, then what was it? He remembered that there was only one such treasure in the god's store, and it was snatched away by that bastard Duan Wuhan. Don't ask me why, just take it. Seeing the surprised look on the unfettered sword martial god's face, Lin Ling chuckled and strode forward. This guy. The unrestrained sword martial god was stunned on the spot. Then, he smiled bitterly. Speaking of which, he should be the elder. Why was it that in front of that brat? He was more like a junior. Even the treasures were given to him as a reward. After entering the ancient city, Lin Ling discovered that the entire city was decorated with lanterns and colored banners. The sound of firecrackers was endless, and the streets were packed with people. I heard that the Immortal Temple's wedding banquet is about to begin. That's right, that's right. I wonder what kind of treasures will appear in this wedding ceremony. The treasures will definitely be extraordinary. After all, the betrothal gift will be the one to marry the holy maiden. Even if we can't obtain it, we can at least take a look at the treasures. Moreover, we can also take a look at the legendary holy maiden with a divine fetus. It's a feast for our eyes. Voices rang out all around, as if they were demonic voices that wanted to flip the sky. As the saying goes, there's no need to worry about things getting out of hand. Now, Lin Ling had a deep understanding of the situation. Next, he walked towards the center of the city. Because he'd also found out that the so-called wedding ceremony would be held at the center of the city. Lin Ling, wait for me. The Mahasvara sword martial deity also caught up from behind. He had taken Lin Ling's treasure, so he naturally felt that he was in the wrong. Therefore, he also accompanied them. Of course, he was also curious about the saintess who had a divine fetus. After all, he also had a divine embryo. However, the saintess' divine embryo was different. It wasn't something she grew up with, but rather something left behind by a god. Soon after, everyone arrived at the center of the city. When they looked around, they saw that there were even more people here. The word happiness was hung everywhere. There was a huge empty space in the center, and there were many chairs on it. There were already many people sitting there, waiting for something. However, that place was not a place where ordinary people could approach. Only those with a directory could enter. Even if it was the unrestrained sword martial god, he couldn't get close to him without a name list, unless he dared to take the risk of provoking several alliances at the same time and openly provoke him. Of course, it wasn't difficult for him to obtain the name list with his strength. However, he couldn't bring himself to marry a young girl. Therefore, at present, those who could sit in the center were undoubtedly very young, and most of them were extremely handsome. They brought their followers and sat proudly on the seats. Thank you for the name list. I'll head over now. At this moment, Lin Ling said to the unrestrained sword martial god with a smile on his face. Then he strode forward. The unrestrained sword martial god smiled wryly. He knew that the reason why Lin Ling could give him a star divine stone was because Lin Ling had the name list. However, how could a mere name list be compared to a star divine stone? He shook his head and found a place to sit at the periphery. Those were the exclusive seats of the Unrestrained Sword Alliance. At this moment, over 10,000 people were seated. Master, that kid? As soon as he sat down, an old man beside the unrestrained sword martial god asked with a smile. Obviously, he was curious about what had happened before. He is not simple. The unfettered sword martial god became dignified again and said indifferently. Then, he closed his eyes and waited for the wedding to begin. His simple words immediately caused the hearts of the people of the Unrestrained Sword Alliance to rumble. This was because there were very few people who could be evaluated by the martial god in such a way. Young Master Wu Heng, look. Just as Lin Ling walked to the center, on one of the seats, an expert suddenly shouted in shock and pointed to the front. At present, there were fewer and fewer young people walking to the center, so Lin Ling was undoubtedly very conspicuous at this moment. Most importantly, he only brought one person. Compared to the other elites, he obviously had fewer attendants and guards. It's Lin Ling.
Being pointed by the expert on the seat, a young man with an extraordinary temperament narrowed his eyes.
He was Duan Wuheng. Why is he here too? Duan Wuheng was extremely surprised. Because in his opinion, the ancient dragon wasteland was so chaotic some time ago. Lin Ling might have died there. But now, Lin Ling had appeared again, and he had come to the wedding ceremony as well. This made him immediately feel uncomfortable. Young master, don't worry. This wedding is a competition. Those who enter here are all love rivals. Therefore, someone will stop him. The expert next to him suddenly said gloomily. His eyes were also turning non-stop. That's right. Hee, it seems that I'm too nervous. These words made Duan Wuheng stunned, and then he laughed proudly. He remembered that this was the wedding. It was a competition of talent, strength, identity, and the most important thing was the betrothal gift. Lin Ling, how could he compare to him? In fact, Lin Ling couldn't even compare to the others. His coming here was just a joke. Moreover, there was no need for him to lose his footing for an ant. Get lost. Sure enough, when Lin Ling just walked into the center, a cold voice immediately came. At the center of the crowd, many young men were looking at Lin Ling with ill intentions. They did not know Lin Ling. However, if Lin Ling entered this place, then he would be their love rival. It was normal that they did not know Lin Ling. Lin Ling was famous in the 36 colleges, but they were in the strongest circle of the Shensan Hall. Moreover, the people behind them were not weak. Compared to the Lin Ling of the past, they were people from two different worlds. Then, a young man appeared in front of Lin Ling, with 3 guards behind him. Trash. Get lost. Do you think a toad like you can eat swan meat? The young man had his hands behind his back, and his domineering aura was unparalleled. Moreover, he felt countless eyes on him, and he proudly puffed out his chest. He did not know if the saint was paying attention to this place, but he could not miss any opportunity. If there was, then the saint would be able to see his glory. Get lost. Lin Ling frowned and looked at the other party. He did not understand why the other party wanted to drive him away. Do you know where this place is? Don't you want to look at yourself in the mirror? Do you know who the saint is? Do you think you are good enough for her? The young man said again. His voice carried the dignity of a superior as he reprimanded Lin Ling. I'm from the 7th Alliance. I'm the crown prince of the great Jin dynasty. My name is Emperor Feng Hua. I don't have time to know your name. I just want you to know that you should know your place. Don't think that you're on the same level as us. This wedding ceremony is not for those who have great talent, great strength, great status, and great betrothal gifts. People like you are insulting the saint and the wedding ceremony. Chapter 39:27. Tianhao. Emperor Fenghua still had his hands behind his back as he looked at Lin Ling arrogantly. He knew that his word should have let this piece of trash know where this place was. Telling this trash to scram was already giving him enough face. Many of the elites present sneered when they saw His Majesty Feng Hua chasing him away. Because even if His Majesty Feng Hua didn't step on that person, they would. Love rivals were one of the reasons. Another reason was that most of them were from the same alliance. They were either from the Sky Alliance or the 7th Emperor Alliance. However, they had never seen the blue-robed young man before. I have a name list. Are you chasing me away? However, Lin Ling didn't seem to notice the crowd's mockery and spoke indifferently. Ha! Emperor Fenghua laughed and looked at Lin Ling from head to toe. He was mocking Lin Ling for being so thick-skinned. The name list is only one of the reasons. It doesn't mean that one has the right to compete for the position of saintess. Only the true Tianhao has the right. Emperor Fenghua said with disdain, Tianhao, I don't think you understand either. Let me explain it to you. He is a god's favored son who is above all the outstanding geniuses. Do you understand? So you're Tianhao. Lin Ling's expression remained calm. Hearing this, Emperor Fenghua shook his head. He could not be bothered to say anything more. Everyone present knew whether he was a Tianhao or not. Since he was able to appear here, he had already received the recognition of others. If he wasn't a Tianhao, then what was he? However, just as he was shaking his head, Lin Ling suddenly took a step forward and threw a light punch. The speed of this punch was very slow, immediately causing Feng Hua Emperor's guards to shout angrily. They wanted to attack, but Fenghua Emperor stopped them. "You're courting death." His Majesty Fenghua also threw out a palm strike. He was an outstanding half-step martial god. He was not afraid of Lin Ling at all. Boom! The two attacks collided, but in the next moment, a huge force came, causing Emperor Fenghua to fly backwards. Crackle! Some of the chairs in the distance were also sent flying by him. Duan Wuhen frowned because he knew that Emperor Fenghua wasn't weak. He was one of the top 300 cultivators on the celestial stairway. Lin Ling is definitely going all out, Duan Wuhen said indifferently. It was not easy for him to send Emperor Fenghua flying. He had to use his full strength. Therefore, he guessed that Lin Ling must have used his full strength. But this still made him feel very uncomfortable because the gap between him and Lin Ling still hadn't closed. Cough cough. At this moment, Emperor Fenghua crawled to his feet, blood dripping from the corner of his mouth. He glared at Lin Ling furiously. "This is the so-called Tianhao?" Lin Ling clasped his hands behind his back and looked at him calmly. His words also made Emperor Fenghua grit his teeth. Veins popped out on his forehead, and he couldn't say a word. "You keep calling me trash and looking down on me, but what about you now? You can't even take a punch from me. Don't you feel ashamed? Don't you think you're cheap? In my opinion, other than your powerful mouth, you're useless in all other aspects," Lin Ling said again. His tone was still calm, but it was as sharp as a sword. "You!" Emperor Fenghua wanted to stand up, but he couldn't help but spit out another mouthful of blood. Lin Ling's punch just now seemed simple. In fact, he had activated his physical strength. It had the strength of 30,000 worlds. "Shut up. The more you talk, the more you'll be like a mad dog." Lin Ling looked at him with disdain. He walked forward and said indifferently, "In fact, I don't know what a Tianhao is. But please, let someone decent come. For someone like Emperor Fenghua, it's a disgrace. Moreover," Lin Ling glanced at the Tianhao before continuing, "Moreover, it's a disgrace to my status." A disgrace to his status? Hearing this, many people's hearts skipped a beat. There was anger in their eyes. Especially Emperor Fenghua. At this moment, he was full of shame. He didn't expect Lin Ling to be so powerful. Previously, he said that those who came here were all people with great talent, great strength, great background, and great betrothal gifts. But where did he get such great strength from? He couldn't even take a hit from someone else. This made his previous words feel like a slap to his own face. And it was a resounding slap to his face. "Stop." However, at this moment, Emperor Fenghua's guard attacked Lin Ling. Emperor Fenghua's dignity was not to be humiliated. Bang! But at this moment, the platinum evil spirit appeared behind Lin Ling. He slowly lifted his cloak, revealing a creepy smile. Oh no! As soon as the smile appeared, an aura from the underworld filled the air. The guard's expression changed and he immediately retreated. Obviously, he was also shocked. However, the platinum evil spirit quickly put his hat back on and followed Lin Ling again. Looking at Lin Ling again, he had already found a seat and sat down. He picked up the wine on the table and drank. The whole process was casual, ignoring the strange looks from the crowd. This also made Emperor Fenghua's guard blush. He wanted to stand up for Emperor Fenghua, but he was frightened by someone else's guard. Obviously, he was also embarrassed. Who is this person? Many people narrowed their eyes and looked at Lin Ling vaguely. They were very curious about Lin Ling. After the short confrontation, many people recognized Lin Ling's qualifications. However, even more people were curious about Lin Ling's background. Unfortunately, other than the people from the Duan family and the New Heavenly Court, most people didn't know about Lin Ling's background. What an arrogant junior! Among the Tianhao people, a soft voice drifted out, mixed with disdain. Hee, let him be proud for a while. A clown like him won't be able to shine. Humph. Shameless person. Humph. Soon, the Tianhao people didn't care about Lin Ling anymore. In their opinion, Lin Ling didn't have the qualifications to enter the eyes of the immortal temple saintess. As for Emperor Fenghua, he immediately snorted, climbed up, and sat back down in shame. However, he also spoke a few words to the chair next to him. There was a young man with jade-like skin sitting there. His eyes were slightly closed as he quietly drank wine as if he didn't care about the matters of the world. He wore a purple dragon robe. This was the purple dragon true robe.
Ordinary people were not qualified to wear it. Only those with the royal aura of emperors were qualified to wear it. This meant that this person was the emperor of all the emperors. And he was also the leader of the 7th Imperial Alliance. He was called the 7th Prince. As for Emperor Feng Hua, he was also a member of the 7th Imperial Alliance. Hearing Emperor Feng Hua's voice, the 7th Prince slowly opened his eyes and looked at Lin Ling. His eyes were very calm, but those who met his eyes felt great waves in their hearts. It was as if they were looking at an imperial edict. However, the 7th Prince quickly retracted his gaze and looked at another Tianhao. He smiled faintly and said, "Duan Wuhan, everything about this wedding is good except for the seats."
Chapter 39:28. Immortal Temple's great elder had arrived. The seat is too hard, not as good as the dragon throne. Just like the temperament of some people, the bones are too hard, making one feel uncomfortable. The 7th Prince swirled the wine glass in his hand and smiled faintly. Everyone was stunned. Some people's temperaments? His bones were too hard? Many people immediately looked at Lin Ling quietly. The 7th Prince seemed to be talking about Lin Ling. Moreover, he used Lin Ling as a seat and sat under his buttocks. However, this seat was a little hard. Haha, that's exactly what I was thinking. Duan Wuhan instantly understood what the 7th Prince meant and couldn't help but laugh. Everyone gradually covered their mouths and laughed. They looked at Lin Ling mockingly. This 7th Prince really kills without spilling blood. With just one sentence, he trampled Lin Ling down. Hearing the laughter, the members of the Unrestrained Sword Alliance frowned. To be able to become an emperor, one must have both strategy and martial strength. The 7th Prince was one of them. Interesting. As for Duan Wuhan, he was extremely excited at the moment. Being able to use the 7th Prince's mouth to humiliate Lin Ling had undoubtedly allowed him to vent his anger. An outsider like Lin Ling had never competed with them before, and no one knew him, so he had become a thorn in their side. However, just when he thought that Lin Ling was going to swallow his anger, a heroic laughter suddenly floated out. "Everything about this wedding banquet is good, but the carpet is too thick." As soon as he spoke, the entire place fell silent. This was because they realized that the one who spoke was Lin Ling. Also, Lin Ling said that the carpet was too thick? One had to know that the carpet here was made from the bark of a wild tree. Although it was a little thick, it was still extremely luxurious and expensive. For a moment, many people were puzzled. They didn't know what Lin Ling meant. The carpet here is as shameless as someone's face. But soon, Lin Ling's voice floated out again. "Ha!" The 7th Prince was originally drinking, but he suddenly stopped and anger quietly flashed in the depths of his eyes. That was because he understood what Lin Ling meant. He was mocking him. The carpet is too thick, and then someone's skin is too thick? Could he be talking about? No, could it be that he's talking about the 7th Prince? The others reacted slower than the 7th Prince, but at this moment, they all reacted. Previously, when the 7th Prince said that the seat was too hard, he was actually mocking Lin Ling for being too arrogant. He was sitting on his butt, yet he was still so hard. However, Lin Ling returned the favor. He mocked the 7th Prince as a carpet under his feet and even said that the latter was thick-skinned. Moreover, it was a seat for sitting. However, one was a carpet for stepping on. Without a doubt, Lin Ling's description was even more accurate. It was as if he was saying that the 7th Prince was being trampled under his feet. How could he still be so thick-skinned? Interesting. Suddenly, an old monster laughed out loud, admiring Lin Ling's wisdom. He was still able to counterattack calmly under such circumstances. It was impossible for him to do so without witnessing a huge scene. The old monsters on the outer ring initially thought that Lin Ling was just a passerby, but their opinion toward Lin Ling had changed. Ha ha! The unrestrained sword martial god could not help but burst out laughing. Not only was the kid's bones tough, his sword sharp, even his mouth was on par with his. It was obvious that it was inappropriate to resort to violence in a place like the bridal welcoming ceremony. Therefore, the Heaven's elites were using other methods to suppress their opponents. However, Lin Ling's counterattack was brilliant. The laughter grew louder, causing the 7th Prince's face to darken. However, he was the leader after all.
Thus he only smiled without showing any sign of anger.
A toad will always be a toad, forever looking at the sky from the bottom of a well. No matter how loud you are, you're still a toad if you can't gain the acknowledgement of the host.
Saying this, he continued to drink.
Of course, the people did not comment on his words. They just thought that the seventh prince was trying to show off because he did not want to lose face. This Lin Ling is so stupid to have offended the seventh prince.
You should know that the seventh prince is a trial tester, and I heard that he is a 3-star trial tester.
Duan Wuhan suddenly sneered.
He knew that Lin Ling had thoroughly offended the seventh prince.
The seventh prince was noble, powerful, and talented. Even Duan Wuhan, the first bloodline of the Duan family, did not dare to underestimate him. Lin Ling was simply courting death by clashing with him. Taking a step back, although Duan Wuhan represented the Heaven Alliance, he was only one of the leaders. He was not even the leader.
On the other hand, the seventh prince was the real leader of the Seventh Imperial Alliance.
Thank you for your kindness.
The Immortal Temple is overwhelmed by your favor.
At this moment, a loud sound of a bronze bell rang. Buddhist chants drifted in the air, causing everyone to calm down. The Immortal Temple was here. Although the Immortal Temple was a Buddhist sect, it was also an evil Buddhist sect. Therefore, their style of doing things was different from that of the Buddhist sect. Of course, the most important thing was that the saintess of the Immortal Temple had the divine fetus body. This was the reason why people came. Under countless gazes, a large number of experts slowly walked out. Not only were there people from the Immortal Temple, but there were also people from the Great Devil sect. Ironically, the Immortal Demon Alliance was formed by the 9 Prefectures' 10 Evils. To be called the 9 Prefectures' 10 Evils, their reputation must be extremely bad.
However, for the divine fetus body, all the heroes regarded the 9 Prefectures' 10 Evils as the 9 Prefectures' big forces.
Therefore, everything was for the sake of benefits.
Great Elder, Great Devil Elder, it's an honor to meet you.
At this moment, everyone stood up and bowed slightly. On the surface, they were obviously doing a very good job of being polite.
Greetings, greetings.
That Immortal Temple's Great Elder revealed a faint smile.
His appearance was benevolent, as if he was an old monk of virtue and prestige. The impression he gave others was quite good.
Young Master Wu Hen, 7th Prince, Dugu Yijian, Crown Prince Tian Qiong. Then, the Great Elder looked at the Tianhao and continued to call out names one by one. Those whose names were called out also revealed smiles on their faces, as if their qualifications to marry the saintess had greatly increased.
Because, to be able to be remembered by the Great Elder, this was not a small honor.
Thanks to your arrival, the Immortal Temple is honored. There were not many people who were called out by the Great Elder, only a dozen or so people. However, these people were extremely famous. Not long ago, in the Battle of the Ancient Dragon Wasteland, they had made a name for themselves. It could even be said that they had become famous in one battle. Great Elder is too polite. In the future, we will be a family. You are also my elder, so I should be the first to greet you. At this time, the 7th Prince also stood up and smiled. He was magnanimous, neither arrogant nor servile,
as expected of the Emperor of Emperors. However, his words were extremely cunning.
He actually treated the Great Elder as one of his own.
It was as if he had already married the saintess of the Immortal Temple.
Of course, people's eyes quietly flashed. From the current situation, the Great Elder called out the 7th Prince's name first. He indeed had the greatest chance. This also made many Tianhao's eyes flash, and their hearts filled with jealousy. Chapter 39-29. Goodbye, Annuaire. The saintess, they obviously would not give her up. After all, she represented the divine embryo body.
Great Elder.
At this moment, Lin Ling also looked at the Great Elder indifferently. He never thought that he would see the Great Elder again. That year, he had met this powerhouse once. At that time, the Great Elder was like Mount Tai, and Lin Ling had no chance to get close. And now, he realized that the first elder wasn't too far away from him.
This was also the result of his years of hard work, worthy of being the thick-skinned 7th Prince.
Then, Lin Ling secretly sneered.
The 7th Prince's words were as if he had completely become the son-in-law of the Immortal Temple.
However, the 7th Prince's calculations were good, but unfortunately, he was going to fail today. After the arrival of the Great Elder, the atmosphere gradually became lively. The powerhouses of the Great Devil sect all sat down, but they did not speak much because they also knew how terrifying the people who appeared here today were. If they joined forces, it would not be difficult to destroy the Great Devil sect. He also knew that the Immortal Temple Fair handing over the Saintess was actually forced by the situation. The Great Elder looked at everyone with a smile. Although it was forced by the situation, it was undeniable that everyone present was a heaven's wealth. If the Saintess could walk together with them, it would be the Saintess' blessing and the Immortal Temple's blessing. Among them, he was most optimistic about the seventh prince because the latter was a trial challenger. Next was Duan Wuhan. This child had awakened the Duan family's first bloodline, and his future was limitless. Oh, some people are just making up the numbers. Just as everyone was talking politely, Duan Wuhan suddenly smiled and looked in a certain direction. Everyone immediately followed his gaze and found that Duan Wuhan was looking at Lin Ling. Making up the numbers? Could it be that Duan Wuhan mocked Lin Ling as making up the numbers? No one knew him. Not even the Immortal Temple? At this time, many people secretly laughed. The seventh prince also laughed sarcastically. How could a lowly commoner compare to him? Due to Lin Ling's sudden mention, the First Elder and the Great Devil Sect's members furrowed their brows as they subconsciously looked towards Lin Ling's side. They clearly did not expect that this person would be so unsociable and become a thorn in their side. However, when they looked at Lin Ling, they were all confused because they had never seen this person before. However, he had a slight impression of it, as if he had seen it somewhere before. For a moment, they couldn't remember where they had seen him before. The Saintess has arrived. At this moment, a voice finally rang out, causing the surroundings to instantly fall silent. Under countless gazes, a white-clothed woman with a long sword strapped to her waist slowly walked towards the central region. Upon closer inspection, this woman was extremely beautiful, like a snow lotus on an icy mountain. Her appearance was otherworldly like a fairy, and her every movement carried a wisp of celestial aura. She was like a fairy that had descended from the 9 heavens. Coupled with the legend of the divine fetus, the woman's body was shrouded in a mysterious glow. It was as if this woman's sleeves were fluttering, as if she could ride the wind and fly away at any moment. Saintess! Many people's eyes immediately narrowed. So beautiful! More people licked their lips. In their eyes, the misty rain made it seem as if a dreamlike goddess was slowly walking towards them. Saintess! The seventh prince's complexion also became dignified. His eyes were somewhat hot, and it was a kind of heat that was determined to obtain her. If the Saintess was only based on her appearance, the seventh prince would not take a liking to her. However, the Saintess not only had a fairy-like appearance, but also possessed a rare divine fetus, which made him extremely eager to act. Now that he had seen the Saintess with his own eyes, the seventh prince discovered that in addition to these 2 major advantages, the Saintess also had an extremely attractive temperament, which was indifference. Indifference to everything in the world. However, this temperament aroused the seventh prince's possessiveness. The more indifferent she was, the more he wanted to break this rule and make this woman his woman. This was the seventh prince's domineering aura. On the other side, Duan Wuhan was also extremely excited at this moment. I didn't expect this Saintess to be so beautiful. Coupled with her divine fetus body, Tehese, she's mine. He, Duan Wuhan, now had the first bloodline of the Duan family. If he could get a divine fetus body, then he would be the first person in the history of the Duan family. It was even possible for him to surpass the Duan lineage martial god. The entire area, and even the entire city, quieted down because of the appearance of an Yuer. It was as if countless ordinary stars were looking at the bright moon in the sky. However, an Yuer's expression was very calm. She also knew what was going to happen today. Regarding this, she obviously refused in her heart. However, she knew that if she refused, the Immortal Temple would be eradicated. Although the Immortal Temple took her away, they treated her very well. The elders of the entire Immortal Temple treated her as their granddaughter. She would remember this kindness, and she would always remember it. Therefore, regarding this marriage ceremony, she did not agree, but she also did not refuse. She even kept asking herself who she really was. Why did her heart always hurt? Why did she always think of that blue-robed young man? Why, in her dusty memories, there was a place that constantly called out to her. However, When she wanted to unravel the layers of fog, she still could not see that place.
All of these mysteries made her want nothing more than to tear them apart. However, the great elder of the immortal temple had once divined for her.
When she wanted to know everything, the truth would be revealed today. Including the things she needed to know, everything that she wanted to know, everything would come to an end today. It was also because of this that she had come.
Come and meet the seventh prince. At this moment, the great elder's voice drifted over, causing Xueqi to immediately retract her absent-minded gaze and look at a handsome young man.
The seventh prince was delighted. He never thought that he would be the first to be introduced. This meant that his chances were the greatest.
He immediately stood up and swept his gaze over all of his love rivals with contempt.
He was just about to speak. "Senior sister Xueqi, I'm here." However, at this moment, an untimely voice interrupted him. Next, on the other side, a blue-robed young man ignored everyone's gazes and stood up with a smile. Everyone was shocked. That blue-robed young man did not understand etiquette at all. He actually turned from guest to host.
After all, the great elder had called the seventh prince first.
There will be a good show to watch. However, soon, many people began to sneer inwardly. Because the blue-robed young man did not understand etiquette, he would definitely be chased away by the immortal temple. Moreover, did he think that people would recognize him just because he shouted? This was simply a joke.
"It's him?"
The seventh prince was stunned. Then, he revealed a mocking smile. Trying to steal his spotlight? That would depend on whether or not he was qualified.
However, Xueqi did not see the crowd's mockery at all. Instead, she looked at the blue-robed young man not far away in surprise.
At this moment, her frozen heart was moved. It began to shatter. It was him. Chapter 39:30. Holding your hand and growing old together. Because she'd been constantly thinking about that mysterious blue-robed young man throughout these years. Even if she still hadn't found her memories, she really missed that blue-robed young man for some unknown reason. Even though the blue-robed young man had told her everything about Xueqi, it wasn't her memories. So, she returned to the temple in an attempt to find everything she had lost. Unfortunately, she wasn't able to find any memories in the end.
"Xueqi, the day of the wedding will be the day to end everything for you." She suddenly remembered what the great elder had said after the divination.
Could it be because of him?
Under countless gazes, Xueqi moved gracefully and actually walked step by step towards the blue-robed young man.
At this moment, the hearts of countless people exploded. What's going on? Isn't the holy maiden an ice beauty? Why did she run over after being seduced by someone else? You must be seeing things. Look again if you don't believe me. Screw your eyesight.
I rubbed my eyes and looked again, but the holy maiden is indeed walking towards the blue-robed young man.
Following that, numerous exclamations of shock could be heard. You've come. Xueqi's speed was slow at first, but she gradually sped up. Linling also walked out with a smile. His handsome face had a hint of excitement. I'm coming. No matter where you are, I'll come. In just a few steps, Linling had already arrived in front of Xueqi. The two of them seemed to ignore everyone in the world as they looked at each other indifferently. Perhaps in their eyes, the world had already disappeared, and the only thing left was each other. It was like a marriage that spanned thousands of generations. I knew you would come today. My intuition told me on the day of the divination. Xueqi was also very excited. She suddenly smiled. With this smile, the flowers dimmed, and the sun and moon lost their light. Everyone's jaws dropped at the sight of this. Smile? The iceberg beauty also smiled? This was even rarer than snow in June. Moreover, the holy maiden was smiling for the blue-robed young man? This time, not only were the people shocked, even the heavenly tycoons were enraged.
Among them, the seventh prince and Duan Wuhan stood there in a daze, as if they had been struck dumb. Especially the seventh prince, who was the first to be introduced and was planning to bask in the envious gazes of everyone. However, the outcome was that the light that belonged to him had been seized away by the blue-robed young man.
One had to know that he had previously mocked the blue-robed youth for being a fake. But now, he was like a toad lusting after a swan. That's enough.
The seventh prince immediately roared.
Shut up. However, Linling did not even look at him.
His eyes were still looking at Xueqi, and gradually became gentle.
You've lost weight.
A soft voice came out of Lin Ling's mouth.
Yeah, you too.
And Xueqi nodded and looked at Lin Ling with concern.
Along the way there have been a lot of troubles. Perhaps it's because of this that you've lost weight. But in the end, I still found you. Lin Ling smiled and a blue lotus appeared in his hand.
Then, he held Xueqi's hand and gently placed it on her small hand.
Hold it, and you'll remember everything. And Xueqi did not reject and allowed Lin Ling to hold her small hand. Then, she held the bright blue lotus.
This lotus looked ordinary, but it emitted a gentle light that made Xueqi feel extremely comfortable.
I like it a lot.
And Xueqi suddenly smiled like a little girl.
Lin Ling also smiled. However, he knew that this blue lotus was not simple. It was the 3 lifetimes bridge of helplessness. It could restore one's memory and unlock all seals. This rare divine flower was bought by Lin Ling at God's store at a high price. Then, he quietly held Xueqi's hand, and the two of them seemed to have walked through thousands of centuries. And Xueqi didn't react at first, but gradually, her eyes began to change because the scene around her had completely changed. She seemed to have returned to the Gu Yen sect. She even saw that stubborn youth. It was Lin Ling. Everything was quietly returning to him at this moment. She seemed to be walking on a small road in the countryside with the youth under the warm sun. The surroundings were very peaceful, and the little flowers by the roadside were very beautiful. Gradually, the Heaven Mystic's kingdom changed, and her clan was annihilated. However, it was the youth who descended from the sky, holding her hand. When she was at her weakest, he brought her through the wind and rain. Her eyes gradually became moist. Her memories were constantly recovering. Finally, it stopped at the Kaiyuan River. The youth of the past had become an indomitable expert. He stepped into the forbidden ground alone, walked through thousands of mountains and rivers, and finally found her. And Xueqi's change was obviously noticed by the Grand Elder. He immediately frowned, stared at the blue lotus, and finally sighed softly. He once divined Xueqi's fate and knew that Xueqi's fate would end today. Therefore, he also agreed to start this wedding ceremony. However, he never expected that the person who solved the fate was actually that youth. It's him. I finally remember. Yes. The first elder muttered to himself. He remembered Lin Ling. That youth seemed to be from Qingzhou, and in the past, he was an extremely weak existence. At that time he also met him once. He even saw Lin Ling pestering the Saint Lady, so he also let the Saint Lady kill Lin Ling. For this, Lin Ling was stabbed by the Saint Lady.
However, in the days after that, he found that the Saint Lady seemed to have something on her mind every day. Moreover, through continuous observation, he knew that the Saint Lady was heartbroken for that youth.
This also made him secretly investigate the youth's background.
He found out that the youth's background was very ordinary, and he was not worthy of the Immortal Temple's Saint Lady.
However, now he finally knew how terrifying that youth was. He actually rose step by step from a passerby, and even reached this place. It was easy to say, but the process was difficult. He could imagine. That young man really liked the Saintess.
Perhaps this is karma.
Sigh. The Grand Elder sighed in his heart.
Compared to his soft sigh, the heavenly heroes were furious.
That was because that blue-robed youth was actually holding the Saint Lady's hand. Not only that, he actually gave her a flower. Most importantly, the Saint Lady actually accepted that flower, and she even looked very happy. This made their jealousy erupt like a volcano. In fact, many people had already prepared bright flowers, but because they could not give them away, they were so angry that their teeth were itching. It's just a lousy lotus.
It's a disgrace to the Saint Lady's status.
Sigh. Someone who couldn't eat the grapes sneered. That's right, that lotus doesn't have any power. It must be a cheap item. Sigh. Someone else added. Because they could not see the origin of the 3 lives 3 worlds bridge of helplessness, their words were also sour. However, for those who were watching the show, they did not see it that way. Chapter 39-31. Selecting a son-in-law. The surrounding scene also changed because of this.
In the end, they even saw that under the light of the lotus, it was already a young man and a young woman.
They held hands and bathed in the warm sunlight, representing pure love. So beautiful. Finally, an old man shouted. This sentence also caused many people to nod their heads, because in their eyes, the young woman was holy and the young man was handsome. They were like a match made in heaven. Holding your hand, growing old together. Especially for some women, this scene was romantic and beautiful. They also hoped that in the future, there would be a man holding their hand under countless gazes, going through all kinds of ups and downs. The entire ancient city was undoubtedly silent. This kid, what a good method. The unrestrained sword martial god kept looking at Lin Ling, the corners of his mouth curved into an excited smile. He clearly did not expect that Lin Ling would be able to win the heart of the immortal temple's saintess from the hands of the Tianhao. This was a ruthless slap to the faces of those Tianhao. Didn't you say that I was just making up the numbers? Didn't you say that I was a toad?
Now, the saintess's hand was held by him. Then who was the toad?
This was not only a slap, it was a refreshing slap. The gentle light gradually disappeared, the light was gorgeous and blurry, but the young man and young woman in the light slowly grew up, and everything returned to normal in the end. However, the one who changed was Xueqi. Because her delicate little face was already full of tears, the tears fell on the ground like blooming flowers. Lin Ling. Under countless shocked gazes, she suddenly hugged Lin Ling and cried like a little girl. Meanwhile, Lin Ling also smiled excitedly. Senior sister Xueqi finally recovered her memories. Fuck. Seeing this, the eyes of the Tianhao were spitting fire. Alright, senior sister Xueqi, you go first. At this time, Lin Ling patted Xueqi's shoulder and said. This pat once again caused an uproar among the Tianhao. Everyone wanted to chop off Lin Ling's arm. No, I want to go with you. However, Xueqi stubbornly shook her head. Lin Ling smiled and said confidently, we have been separated for so many years. Since we met again, let's treat it as me marrying you again. I want you to come back in glory and I want everyone to know that you are my, Lin Ling's woman. Lin Ling's last sentence was filled with a man's domineering aura and unwavering determination. Xueqi stared at the affectionate man in front of her with her beautiful eyes. She was stunned for a moment before she nodded. Although she didn't know why Lin Ling said that, she believed in Lin Ling. I'll wait for you. Xueqi looked at Lin Ling reluctantly and walked over to the first elder. However, her I'll wait for you undoubtedly broke the hearts of countless people. It was as if they were watching a beautiful woman leave, as if they were watching a powerful divine fetus fly away and land on the blue-robed youth's body. Then the blue-robed youth sullied it. How could they swallow this anger? First elder. Duan Wuhan immediately roared out. However, the first elder didn't pay attention to him. Instead, he looked at Xueqi and saw that her eyes were much clearer. He also knew that the saintess had recovered her memories. After recovering her memories, the saintess was no longer as flawless as she was in the past. This made him sigh in his heart. From the perspective of the immortal temple, he didn't want the saintess to recover her memories. This was because the saintess was flawless and untainted by the mortal world. She shouldn't have any mortal memories. But from a personal point of view, he was happy for the saintess. This was because he had been with the saintess all these years. He had carefully guided the saintess and wanted the saintess to take over the immortal temple. After a long time, even if he was unfeeling and callous like an evil Buddha, he was still moved by that kind of affection. And that was familial love. He clearly regarded Xueqi as his own granddaughter. Therefore, when Duan Wuhan spoke, he didn't speak. If the saintess could be happy, he would rather the saintess follow that youth. First elder. However, Xueqi nodded to the first elder. The first elder was stunned. He understood the saintess' meaning. She wanted the wedding ceremony to continue. But the first elder couldn't help but glance at Lin Ling. He knew in his heart that with Lin Ling alone, he couldn't compare to the various Tianhao. If the wedding ceremony is interrupted, those guys will use it as a pretext to make a fuss. Xueqi also smiled. I know, but compared to the immortal temple, you are more important. The first elder sighed and suddenly transmitted his voice. Right now, he didn't seem like an evil Buddha who killed people like scything flax. He was more like an old man who was worried about his granddaughter. Buddha also had emotions. Evil also had emotions. Don't worry, I believe in him. Xueqi's heart warmed. This made the first elder frown. He still doubted Lin Ling because only he knew how powerful the Tianhao present were.
But since things had come to this, he could only nod.
Next, the wedding ceremony will continue. When his voice was heard, the entire ancient city cheered. The people who were watching the show clearly didn't want things to end so quickly, because they were here to broaden their horizons. They wanted to see who was more nouveau riche and could throw out a large number of divine artifacts. As for the Tianhao, they were also excited. Previously, they had thought that the duck in their mouth would fly away. Luckily, the immortal temple was sensible and knew how to behave. Then the Tianhao looked at Lin Ling mockingly, as if mocking Lin Ling for being weak and powerless. Even if he won the saintess' heart, it was useless because the saintess belonged to them. In this world, strength is everything. Only the strong can be respected. That's right. The saintess doesn't understand this yet. But in the future, I believe she will understand. The so-called love is actually built on strength. That kid is so pitiful. He can only watch the beauty leave.
I'm afraid after tomorrow, he will suffer a fate worse than death.
Maybe he will drown his sorrows in alcohol. He might even get drunk to death. The Tianhao regained their confidence from before. Duan Wuhan and the seventh prince looked at each other and raised their wine cups. Then, the two of them looked at Lin Ling at the same time. Although they didn't say a word, their eyes were full of mockery.
Lin Ling laughed, raised his wine cup, and drank without saying anything else.
Great Elder, there are many people who want to marry the saintess. Why don't you say a condition and then keep sifting through them? Let's filter out those who are just here to make up the numbers. How about that?
At that moment, someone spoke up.
Yes. Let's compare strength, talent, status, and background.
No matter what, the saintess has to find a good family to be worthy of the immortal temple.
The others immediately agreed.
Hearing that, the great elder looked at Xueqi again.
Because he knew that once he agreed, there would be no turning back. After all, if someone won in the end and it wasn't Lin Ling, Xueqi couldn't go back on her words. Otherwise, the immortal temple would be destroyed. Chapter 39-32. Clover. They had the leader of an overlord with them. Taking a step back, Duan Wuhan also had a great background. He was a leader of the Heavenly Alliance and came here on behalf of the Heavenly Alliance. That guy could not be compared with others at all.
Then let's do the screening. After cursing inwardly, the first elder looked at the crowd helplessly and said,
Good. The Holy Maiden is a divine fetus, so anyone who wants to be a match for her must be someone with outstanding talent, right? Suddenly, someone shouted, That's right. Great talent, great status, and great background. Let's use this as a filter. As for the martial arts competition, there's no need. After all, today is a joyous day. More and more people nodded in agreement, intending to use 3 criteria to filter out the candidates. The first was naturally talent. Otherwise, how could he be worthy of an Xueqi? When it came to talent, all the Tianhao experts smiled confidently. Since they were able to become Tianhao experts, how could their talent be weak? You actually want to compare talents? This old man is untalented, so I'll borrow a clover to test you. At this moment, a respected senior smiled faintly and waved his right hand. A stream of light appeared and landed on the ground. Then, it quietly grew, and a fragrance quietly spread out. Clover?
This is the 3 leaves old man.
Many people stared at that senior and suddenly understood. This person was a martial god, famous in the final world. He was a duke and had a romantic love story with his wife. Thus, he was extremely loyal to love and would help his loved ones. The 3-leaf clover was cultivated by him. Not only could it be used to test one's talent, it could also be used to assist one's cultivation. According to legend, when one's talent reached a certain level, the 3-leaf clover would bloom. The more beautiful the flower, the higher the talent. If he could make the flower soar into the sky, that would be a beautiful and shocking thing. All right, let's use the 3-leaf clover. Many people nodded in agreement. Today was the wedding day. In order to please the beauty, it was better to use beautiful and romantic things. The clover represented love, so it was very suitable. I'll go first. After the 3-leaf clover grew on the ground, a prideful Tianhao walked up to it.
When he got close, a mysterious force rushed into the three-leaf clover. The three-leaf clover that was as tall as a person swayed quietly.
Suddenly, a flower bud bloomed.
It was about the size of a palm and was pitch black.
This guy's talent is really ugly. He actually has a black flower.
And it's only the size of a palm. I'm afraid it's only a fourth-grade talent.
Shameful. Seeing this, many people immediately laughed sarcastically. Tianhao's expression was also extremely ugly. In the end, he left the central region with his tail between his legs.
Obviously, he also knew that although his identity was not bad and he had a strong background, his talent was not very good and he was eliminated.
If you want the flower to bloom brilliantly, then you need to be talented.
If you want the flower to bloom high enough to reach the 9 heavens, then you need to be strong.
The 3 leaves old man explained with a smile.
Let me.
Another Tianhao had made his move, displaying his talent and strength.
Bang!
The clover shot out like a firework, blooming into a beautiful flower bud in the sky, shocking the entire city. Because this flower was incomparably gorgeous, it instantly moved the hearts of many girls.
The flower is not bad.
Unfortunately, the color is too dim.
Let me do it.
Another Tianhao had made his move.
He was not weak and could make the flower soar to the 9 heavens.
Most importantly, his flower was obviously bigger than the previous one. This Tianhao's talent had probably reached the 7th grade. The crowd was suddenly in an uproar. However, the more powerful Tianhao had yet to come. This was because someone's talent had reached the 8th grade. He was like the king of flowers. After blooming, the sky was filled with brilliant light.
Hee.
After activating it, he immediately looked at Annuaire, wanting to please the beauty.
Of course, Annuaire still looked at him coldly.
There's no 8th grade talent. Looks like he's going to be eliminated. As time passed, many people also saw some shortcomings. They're all a bunch of insignificant people. At this time, Duan Wuhan finally walked out and displayed his talent.
Pa!
In the sky, an unprecedentedly huge petal bloomed. It was green. After appearing in the sky, it was incomparably huge and extremely beautiful. After the petals gradually dispersed, endless green light sprinkled down like a meteor shower.
So beautiful.
This scene undoubtedly shocked many people. Because Duan Wuhan was also the most beautiful person to display his talent so far. This also meant that he had a higher chance of getting the saint than the previous people.
Duan Wuhan is already so powerful.
What if it's the 7th prince? Suddenly, someone looked at the 7th prince. The 7th prince smiled and walked forward proudly. His talent was on display. This time, countless people were also looking forward to it. Almost at the same time, the clover swayed slightly. Then, several golden dragons soared into the sky and intertwined, forming a huge golden dragon flower in the sky. This flower was so huge that it was even more magnificent than the ancient city. It could be seen clearly from thousands of miles away. Moreover, this flower represented endless nobility and glory. This was also the most gorgeous, most beautiful, and even the noblest flower to date. I'm afraid his talent has reached grade 10. Moreover, his flower can fly so high. I'm afraid his strength is not weak in the martial god realm. The Clover Elder also shouted in shock. His words made countless people's pupils tremble. The 7th prince was indeed powerful. As for the 7th prince, he had his hands behind his back. He looked elegant as he slowly walked back. Without a doubt, his blossoming immediately made the Tianhao lose their luster. He was the #1 person now. However, the Tianhao clenched their teeth. Although they could not compare to the 7th prince, at least they had not been eliminated. After all, as long as they reached the 8th grade ultimate desolate body, they would be qualified to match the saint. There were still 2 more selections. It was too early to determine who would emerge victorious. Not bad, not bad. Next, let's proceed to the 2nd selection. Duan Wuhan's expression turned ugly as he said coldly. In terms of talent, he was inferior to the 7th prince, but he was confident that he could turn the tables in the next 2 selections. Then let's prepare for the 2nd selection. Seeing the restless looks of the crowd, the great elder could not help but nod his head. Just as he was about to continue speaking, an indifferent voice suddenly sounded. Hold on, I don't think I've displayed my talent yet. The moment the voice was heard, everyone was stunned. Following that, everyone looked at the person who spoke and realized that it was Lin Ling. This time, the Tianhao were stunned. This was because from the beginning, they had not expected Lin Ling to display any talent. Forget it. I estimate that you are at most a third-grade talent. A Tianhao said disdainfully. The spectators outside were also getting impatient. That guy was not a famous Tianhao, so he was wasting his time. A third-grade talent? That does seem to be the case. Chapter 39-33. 100 Flowers Kill. Ha ha ha. Laughter could not help but ring out. That guy was here to embarrass himself. Unfortunately, they did not know that Lin Ling was indeed a third-grade talent, so there was no need for him to deny it. However, did he only have one type of talent? Let him show off. Everyone has a chance. The great elder looked at Lin Ling with eyes full of disappointment, but he also secretly spoke up for Lin Ling. The great elder is benevolent. That kind of brat will only embarrass himself. I doubt if he can make the three-leaf clover bloom. Seeing that the great elder had agreed, the Tianhao did not dare to object. However, after sitting down, they immediately began to mock and ridicule. Haha, must you embarrass yourself? The seventh prince was drinking wine, but his words were full of contempt. Obviously, he did not think that Lin Ling was his opponent. How could Lin Ling's flowers be as beautiful and noble as his? However, he did not intend to stop Lin Ling. In fact, he even supported Lin Ling to take the test. Because only by taking the test could he let Lin Ling know how lowly he was. Lin Ling? As for Duan Wuhan, he also revealed a sarcastic smile. He knew that Lin Ling's talent was very powerful and was not as simple as it seemed. However, he also knew that no matter how powerful Lin Ling was, he could not compare to him and Duan Wuhan. This was also the reason why he did not speak up before. He was too lazy to talk about Lin Ling's talent. Anyway, it was just a flash in the pan. Under everyone's gaze, Lin Ling also walked out step by step. His face was calm, like an ancient well without ripples. Many people secretly scolded Lin Ling for being shameless and pestering the saintess. On the contrary, An Yuer looked at Lin Ling expectantly. Her beautiful eyes were filled with excitement.
Beside her, the great elder wanted to say something but stopped.
In the end, he sighed. Now, he was afraid that Lin Ling would be eliminated. At that time, the saintess would have to marry someone else. His heart ached when he saw the saintess washing her face with tears every day. Brat, work harder. If you can't do it, just say that your old injury is acting up today and you are not allowed to use your realm essence. I will guarantee that you will enter the second round. In the end, the great elder could not help but secretly send a message to Lin Ling. Lin Ling was stunned. Then, he looked at the elder with disdain and sent a message. Get lost. Hearing this, the great elder was stunned. There were only countless words of concern in his heart. Help you get struck by lightning out of kindness? Although he knew that Lin Ling would be eliminated sooner or later in the next 2 rounds, he still gave him a chance, a hope. But the brat ask him? When my flowers bloom, 100 flowers kill flowers. Just as the great elder was about to fly into a rage, Lin Ling's voice floated over again, leaving the great elder dumbfounded. What? How could a third-grade talent be so arrogant? 100 flower kill? Kill your sister. He could no longer bear to see this. As for Lin Ling, he had already stopped in front of the 3-leaf clover. He closed his eyes and was preparing his Dantian's talent. However, in the eyes of the crowd, Lin Ling did not even have the strength to make the 3-leaf clover bloom. Haha! People could not help but laugh. But at this moment, the flower finally bloomed. It was very dim and tiny. Although it was rushing towards the sky, it was like the light of a star. This was because this was Lin Ling's lightning Dantian. It was the weakest. This brat doesn't even have an ultimate desolate body, right? Many people rubbed their eyes. They were laughing so hard that their stomachs hurt. But at this moment, the 3-leaf clover swayed once again. A new petal bloomed and rushed towards the sky. These 2 talents? All the laughter from before froze. It's only a 3rd-grade ultimate desolate body. Although some people were surprised, they still spoke with disdain. However, was that all they were surprised about? Before the green petal reached the sky, the 3-leaf clover swayed once again. a resplendent flower bud appeared and rose into the sky again. Previously, it was the supreme nether wind dragon. This time, it was the heavenly dragon talent. It was a 5th grade talent. The central region suddenly fell silent. Everyone's eyes widened. 3 talents? Even the 7th prince furrowed his brows. He never expected that this guy would be so capable. Pang! At this moment, the 3-leaf clover swayed again. Another flower soared into the sky. This was the realm-devouring beast. Pang! However, this was not the end. Following that, the 5th flower bloomed. This flower was not only huge, but it was also extremely strange. It was colorful. After it rushed into the sky, 5 petals appeared in the sky. They were slowly blooming, scattering endless brilliance. The entire city fell silent. Those who mocked Lin Ling previously trembled. This was because this was the blooming of 5 flowers. Furthermore, these flowers were of different colors. After they bloomed in the sky, they formed a beautiful and flawless scene. This was the only case of 5 flowers blooming so far. Good. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. I never thought I would be able to see 5 flowers blooming in my lifetime. The 3-leaf clover was the most excited. It was rare to see someone with 5 talents. Until now, he had only seen a martial artist with 3 talents. Pa. The sky was beautiful and gorgeous, like fireworks blooming. The ground was silent. Countless people looked up at the sky, afraid that they would miss the most beautiful scene in their lives. The first elder's body trembled. He looked at the sky in disbelief. He was more excited than anyone else. And Xueqi smiled. Her smile was beautiful and moved because she knew that this was a flower that Lin Ling had given her. Beautiful! She muttered to herself. There was no flower in this world that could compare to a flower given by a lover. Humph! However, at this moment, a cold snort suddenly sounded, interrupting everyone's shock. It was the 7th prince. He drank his wine and said disdainfully, "They are just ordinary flowers. So what if they bloom?" He was obviously mocking Lin Ling for his low talent level. Although he had many talents, they were just ordinary flowers. Hearing this, Lin Ling turned to look at the 7th prince without saying a word. "In front of my golden dragon flower, yours is just an ordinary flower. You are just a toad." The 7th prince also looked at Lin Ling, as if he was afraid that Lin Ling did not understand the meaning of his words. "If one day, you realize that yours is an ordinary flower, I wonder if you will admit that you are a toad?" Lin Ling said calmly. "Haha, do you think that is possible?" Hearing this, the 7th prince laughed loudly. His laughter was full of sarcasm. It was a joke. Bang! Almost at the same time, Lin Ling gently stomped his foot on the ground. The 3-leaf clover swayed crazily. Golden light shot into the sky. Endless imperial might. It was as if the human king had descended. Rumble! A bright shooting star rushed into the sky. Then, it bloomed, sprinkling down the world's most beautiful bud. It was brilliant and lit up the sky. This flower was so big that it occupied the entire ancient dragon wasteland. This was the divine fetus, the flame of the human king. When my flower blooms, hundreds of flowers will die. At this moment, it was fully displayed and shocked the world. Rumble! A deafening sound rang in the sky. The sky was filled with divine flowers. It was beautiful and romantic. It was completely reflected in everyone's eyes. Chapter 39-34. Shock. Her heart began to ripple. Even though she was pure and indifferent to fame and fortune, she was truly moved at this moment. This was because that was the flower her man had prepared for her. It was also the flower for his proposal. Her man had once said that he would marry her again today. And now, her man had done it. He had done it with all his heart. In this life, to have a man who would protect her like this, what was there to complain about in life? Looking around, the entire place was silent. Everyone was attracted by the gorgeous scene in the sky. It was as if a huge silence had descended. No one opened their mouths or spoke. This was because all of this was too shocking. Especially the 7th prince and Duan Wuhan. They remained silent for a long time. 10,000 whys floated in their hearts. That was because the final golden flower, judging from its appearance and height, was actually twice as large and proud as the 7th prince's flower. And the 7th prince's golden dragon flower was a 10th grade ultimate desolate body. Could it be that the resplendent golden light and the huge flower formed by the golden flames was a divine fetus? However, the immortal temple had only bought one of the 6 divine fetus in God's shop. Confused. They immediately became confused. In fact, even Elder Three Leaves found it hard to be certain. He only knew that on the surface, the huge flower formed by the golden flames was indeed more beautiful and bigger than the 7th prince's golden dragon flower. Of course, this was only one of the reasons. Most importantly, even if Lin Ling's final flower was not a divine fetus, just the 6 blooming flowers in the sky, forming the scene of the 5 flowers holding the moon, was enough to shock the world. This was because 6 different talents were blooming at the same time. It's fake. Fuck, it's definitely fake. In the silence, Duan Wuhan finally let out a sharp cry. To him, everything was too fake. This was because he had once lost to Lin Ling, so he knew Lin Ling's strength. At that time, Lin Ling had not reached such heights. Furthermore, even if Lin Ling's strength had greatly improved over this period of time, it was impossible for him to improve by such a large margin. Are you saying that my 3-leaf clover is fake? Hearing Duan Wuhan's words, the 3 Leaves old man's face turned ugly. This was because his 3 leaves represented pure love, and he couldn't bear to be questioned by others. Hearing this, Duan Wuhan found it somewhat difficult to refute because he was not sure. But if Lin Ling had a divine embryo, he would not believe it at all. A divine fetus. This was an innate talent that could allow one to become a god. How could a mere Lin Ling have the qualifications to obtain it? It should be known that even Duan Wuhan, as the #1 bloodline of the Duan clan, didn't have the opportunity to obtain it. What qualifications did Lin Ling have? Regardless of whether it's true or not, for now, the flower he displayed is the most beautiful. Isn't that enough? But right at this moment, the voice of the temple's grand elder suddenly drifted over, and it actually carried a wisp of praise. And such words made people nod their heads repeatedly. Today was a wedding ceremony, not a test of strength. Therefore, as long as one had a certain level of talent and could make the proposal more beautiful and romantic than the others, that was enough. The way I see it, this young friend should be #1 in the selection of talent. Seeing that no one spoke, the grand elder of the immortal temple suddenly laughed. His eyes also looked at Lin Ling, and the smile at the corner of his mouth suddenly became thicker. Previously, he was still afraid that Lin Ling would go and lose face. He was even afraid that Lin Ling would be eliminated, so he secretly helped Lin Ling. However, the result was that Lin Ling had told him to get lost. At that time, he was so angry that his beard was blown up. What a junior who did not know what was good for him. But now, he almost hugged Lin Ling and kissed him a few times. This guy really did not disappoint. He is #1. Hearing the Grand Elder's words, the Tianhao felt disbelief and anger. What was unbelievable was that this unknown existence had actually made the 3-leaf clover release such a divine scene. What was angry was that the young man was above all of them. However, before they could release their unwillingness, many voices of agreement had already sounded around the ancient city. If we talk about the beauty of the flower, that person deserves to be #1. Yes. Yes, beauty without losing nobility, vulgarity without losing mystery. The 6 blooming flowers each have their own characteristics. It is indeed rare. He is #1, I concede. Yes. Even some experts from the Overlord Alliance were nodding their heads at this moment. This made the Tianhao clench their teeth, and none of them spoke. Duan Wuhan also angrily sat back down. When he looked at the 7th prince again, he was undoubtedly more furious than Duan Wuhan. His gaze was fixed on Lin Ling. However, Lin Ling was still looking at the sky. When it gradually dimmed, he turned and walked back to his seat. If at some point you realize that you are the flower, I wonder if you will admit that you are the toad? Yes. However, a soft voice, filled with disdain and domineeringness, drifted out. Hearing this, the 7th prince was stunned, and his heart exploded. Previously, he had mocked Lin Ling as a flower and a toad. But now, his golden dragon flower paled in comparison to Lin Ling's. Then who was the toad? Lin Ling's words were like a fatal sword that pierced deeply into the 7th prince's heart, causing him to lose all face and suffer the greatest humiliation. And he was a participant of the trial. When had he ever been humiliated like this? Amazing, This person actually stomped the seventh prince down. How domineering! Everyone immediately sensed the seventh prince's cold aura, and they were all shocked. Then, many people looked at Lin Ling, and their expressions became complicated. Until now, they still did not know who this mysterious young man was.
It felt as if this young man had appeared out of nowhere, as if he had come from another world.
Moreover, this mysterious aura was not faked.
This was because the young man's confidence came from the bottom of his heart. The aura of a person in a superior position unknowingly spread out, and he was unfazed by anything. This aura of a person in a superior position, if one carefully sensed it, was even stronger than the seventh prince's.
Divine fetus? Does he really have a divine fetus? That's hard to say. Only the 3 Leaves elder knows.
After all, he was the one who cultivated the 3 Leaves grass.
A divine fetus is no small matter. I just don't know if it's innate or acquired.
If it's innate, then it's even more terrifying.
Many old monsters who had cultivated for 10,000 years whispered to each other.
The difference between innate and acquired was huge, just like the difference between acquired divine weapons and innate divine weapons.
Innate was the divine fetus of the era of gods, and was blessed by the heavens. Acquired was a divine fetus that was continuously cultivated by oneself. In today's world, there were many people who had acquired divine fetus, such as the 9 provinces' 10 martial gods. But those who had innate divine fetus were as rare as phoenix feathers and Qilin horns, such as the current immortal temple Saintis. Of course, this did not mean that acquired divine fetus was inferior to innate divine fetus, but among acquired divine fetus, at least 99% of them could not advance to innate divine fetus. It's Lin Ling. Also, I'm one of the leaders of the Heavenly Alliance. This person's status was clearly higher than the previous person. Get out of here. Then, Tian Hao shouted angrily at that person. That person gritted his teeth and sat back down in shame. Following that, a large number of heavenly magnates started shouting. Some of them were sons of main cities, while others were leaders.
All in all, the fact that these Tianhao cultivators were here meant that they had extraordinary backgrounds.
Lin Ling, I'll go first. Use your ears and listen carefully. Let me tell you, although you won in the previous competition of talent, you'll definitely lose in the following one.
At this moment, a majestic voice interrupted the competition of all the heavenly magnates.
This also attracted everyone's attention. This time, it was Duan Wuhan who spoke. He slowly walked out and walked toward Lin Ling step by step. This. Interesting. Many people were stunned for a moment, and then revealed mocking smiles. They obviously knew that Duan Wuhan intended to use his powerful status to crush Lin Ling and make him speechless and ashamed. I'm Duan Wuhan. Duan Wuhan's footsteps finally stopped. He first looked at Yuer, then stared at Lin Ling. He wanted to crush Lin Ling face to face and make Lin Ling feel inferior. The #1 bloodline of the Duan family will definitely surpass the Duan Meridian Martial God in the future. What Duan Meridian Martial God? Lin Ling, do you know? He's one of the top 10 martial gods in Zhou. Duan Wuhan shouted sternly. However, Lin Ling's eyes were half closed as he calmly drank his wine. Seeing this, Duan Wuhan did not have any anger. Instead, he felt happy because he knew that Lin Ling could not refute him. I'm a master of the E-Garden, ranked 36th in the strongest circle of the Shenzan Hall, and 291st on the Stairway Heaven. Duan Wuhan's voice was louder and louder. Hearing this, the people of the Duan family immediately laughed and felt proud of Duan Wuhan. The onlookers gasped. They obviously knew Duan Wuhan. He was a genius who had awakened the #1 bloodline of the Duan family. Many seniors in the final world were optimistic about him. But no one thought that Duan Wuhan would rush to the 200th place on the Stairway Heaven in such a short period of time. This speed was too fast. Duan Wuhan glanced at the crowd and saw the awe in everyone's eyes. His arrogance soared to the sky. Then he looked at Lin Ling and shouted angrily, "And I'm one of the leaders of the Heaven Alliance. I can summon 3 million heroes. Lin Ling, are you afraid? Are you feeling inferior?" At this moment, the rolling momentum also spread out, as if to drown Lin Ling. This was also Duan Wuhan's revenge. Because he had been waiting for this day for a long time. However, Lin Ling was like a small boat in the storm. He seemed to be silent,
But he drifted with the waves and was not drowned. He was still drinking wine. As for the inferiority in Duan Wuhan's words, it was simply not there. So calm. Ordinary people who knew of Duan Wuhan's origin and such proud achievements would inevitably have thoughts of resistance, but they could not resist. In the end, they could only feel inferior and decadent. However, the blue-robed young man was not shocked even if the sky collapsed. From beginning to end, he did not even open his eyes. However, perhaps his heart is already decadent, but he is just using drinking to cover up his emotions. People were talking about it. But more people could see that Duan Wuhan was not only showing off his proud identity and achievements, but he was also targeting Lin Ling. That kind of feeling was as if he wanted to defeat Lin Ling. Could it be that Duan Wuhan and Lin Ling had a secret that no one knew? No matter how much you say, no matter how proud you are, in my eyes, you are just a defeated opponent. Garden ate feces. You know this better than me. Finally, Lin Ling opened his mouth, but he was still drinking wine. However, his words were more than thousands of words from Duan Wuhan. Because no matter how Duan Wuhan showed his identity and achievements, there was one fact that could not be changed, and that was that he was a defeated opponent. In the Battle of Garden, in the Battle of Tong Tian Tower, Duan Wuhan lost to Lin Ling. This was a result that could not be erased. Lin Ling's words were very ordinary to others, but to Duan Wuhan, it was like a sword piercing his heart. Duan Wuhan stepped back, and his face changed greatly. The shame that had been hidden in his heart rippled at this moment. That huge feces pit. You ate it very well.
Chapter 39-36. A battle between dragons and tigers. A cesspool. Thinking of this, Duan Wuhan almost vomited.
One had to know that for countless nights, he had tried to forget that shameful thing, and he had done very well.
Where he fell he climbed up.
That shame had been forgotten and suppressed by him. However, this was only temporary. Because after being mentioned by Lin Ling, it was as if the scar that had just healed had been torn open again.
Bang! Duan Wuhan took another step back. His body continued to tremble. This change had undoubtedly shocked everyone. Because this result was too strange. Lin Ling hadn't announced his identity, or perhaps he didn't have an identity at all. However, his words were more effective than any impressive battle record. He had defeated Duan Wuhan and forced him to retreat. His heart of martial arts seemed to have become unstable. Terrifying. Really terrifying. People's impression of Lin Ling had also changed. It became self-confident, calm, untamed, and unruly. Duan Wuhan, you've lost face. At this moment, the seventh prince suddenly spat out a sentence, causing Duan Wuhan to glare fiercely at Lin Ling. However, he also retreated in dejection. He knew in his heart that before he could completely wash away the shame, all his proud achievements were just a joke to Lin Ling. After all, no matter how powerful a defeated opponent was, he was still a defeated opponent. I said, let's compete in identity and background. Come on. At this moment, the seventh prince also stood up and swept his eyes across the crowd. I don't want to introduce my identity too much.
You only need to know that I'm the leader of the Seventh Alliance, the top 200 on the heavenly stairway.
Next, let's compete in background.
The seventh prince regarded himself as the leader of the crowd, and had already decided on the next selection. He did not even bother to introduce himself. However, 80% of the people present knew who he was. Although Duan Wuhan's alliance was more powerful, the Sky Alliance, he was just a leader of the Sky Alliance. Although the Seventh Alliance could not be compared to the Sky Alliance, the seventh prince was still the leader. In terms of alliance, Duan Wuhan was obviously more powerful, but in terms of identity, the seventh prince was actually more outstanding. This was also an imperial talent. Just like the purple dragon robe he wore, it was the image of the monarch of all monarchs. The so-called competition of background is also a competition of betrothal gifts. Immortal Temple's Holy Lady has a divine core body. Only heavenly deity treasures are worthy of her. Step by step, the seventh prince stepped forward and looked at An Yu-er. His domineering eyes were filled with a hint of gentleness. Men, bring me the ninth heaven phoenix robe. Suddenly he let out a loud shout. In the sky, the cry of a phoenix resounded. An old woman arrived with the nine heavens phoenix robe shimmering with golden light.
causing the phantom of a 9-color divine phoenix to float in the sky. This was an 8th-grade divine artifact. This is the 7th prince's betrothal gift? Many people gasped because the 9 heavens phoenix robe was made from the feathers of 9 different phoenixes. It was extremely rare, especially after the 6th phoenixes.
The next 3 phoenixes were even harder to find.
If this 9 heavens phoenix robe was placed in the shop of God, it would cost 3 million golden fleece flower. The 7th prince is marrying the holy maiden. Is this all you've got? However, at this moment, someone shouted loudly and confronted the 7th prince. It was a Tianhao. Mine is a rare treasure, the sky-shaking bell fruit. Anyone who consumes it will greatly increase their strength within 2 hours. They will be able to kill any half-step martial god and can even fight against an early-stage martial god. It is worth 5 million golden fleece flower. Yours is only a divine weapon. How can it compare to my rare treasure? The Tianhao stood up like a divine general. His body emitted boundless energy. Haha, it is merely a sky-shaking bell fruit. The 7th prince walked towards Xueqi step by step with his hands behind his back. He looked extremely calm. Men, bring me the heaven-earth dark yellow exquisite flower. This flower is worth 8 million golden fleece flower. It contains the power of the universe and can destroy heaven and earth. Men, bring me another divine treasure, the Empress Earth-flying rainbow formation diagram. This diagram is extremely rare and suitable for martial artists of any attribute. If you cultivate with this diagram, you can increase the ancestral power of all attributes. It's worth 9 million gold fleece flower. Men, bring me a half-step king divine pill. This pill can make you a martial god with a 50% chance. The 7th prince spoke one sentence after another, dominating the world. Meanwhile, the Tianhao stood up and confronted the 7th prince, but they were all killed without leaving a single armor behind. Every time they brought up a treasure, the 7th prince would calmly fight back and suppress them with a treasure. Tycoon. This was a true tycoon. As expected of the 7th Emperor Alliance's leader. Although many of the people present were Tianhao of the 7th Emperor Alliance and knew that the 7th prince was definitely not simple, they did not expect him to have accumulated so many golden fleece flowers. Could it be that he is the one who bought the divine inheritance treasure in the end? Even the old monsters in the ancient city were shocked. Then they saw that all the Tianhao were defeated by the 7th prince. They could not fight back at all. This was because those heavens conquerors only had 1 treasure, and the more powerful ones only had 2. Chapter 39-37. Who will get the treasure? Haha, Duan Wuhan is not that stupid. As long as the Saintess marries him, won't the Saintess treasure also be his? Now, let's see how the 7th prince will fight with Duan Wuhan. Many people began to whisper. They looked at the central region where the treasure light soared into the sky. Each of them licked their lips and were extremely envious. Moreover, this trip had opened their eyes. They knew that they had not come in vain. In fact, this was indeed the case. At this moment, in the central region, all kinds of colors soared into the sky, dazzling everyone. However, the 7th prince's expression was still calm. He looked indifferently at Duan Wuhan and said, Duan Wuhan, do you really want to fight with me? 7th prince, if it were anything else, I can give way. However, if it's someone I love, I will never give way. The Saintess is the love of my life. If I miss her, I will be in so much pain that I wish I were dead. Duan Wuhan nodded and looked affectionately at Xueqi as he said, Haha, that's nice to hear. But do you think you can beat me? The 7th prince said again. His words made Duan Wuhan's expression change. He had already taken out a treasure worth 30 million gold fleece flower. Did the 7th prince still have other treasures? However, whatever he was worried about, it came. The fruit of immortality. A rare treasure. One is worth 20 million gold fleece flower, and the great void golden phoenix body is worth 25 million gold fleece flower. The owner will have 2 great talents. Most importantly, this is the ultimate 10th grade desolate body. The 7th prince sneered disdainfully. He opened his hands. In his left hand was a grey fruit, and in his right hand was a golden light. In that light, there was a phoenix cry. The fruit of immortality? A fruit that could make a martial god expert immortal. This represented a life. In the 9 states, it was enough for martial god experts to fight for it. Looking at the great void golden phoenix body, this was the ultimate 10th grade desolate body. It was simply an existence that could let an ordinary warrior achieve the ultimate 10th grade desolate body. The 7th prince's move was terrifying. Adding it up, he had taken out 65 million gold fleece flower. Bang! Looking at the 7th prince in disbelief, Duan Wuhan's heart immediately roared. His complexion changed greatly, and he was so shocked that he took a step back.
Obviously, he did not expect the 7th prince to be so generous as to take out 65 million golden fleece flower.
So what? You still want to fight me? Seeing Duan Wuhan's appearance, the 7th prince smiled disdainfully, but his voice was like a brilliant heavenly might. Under the heavens, who can fight against me?
The 7th prince looked at all the heavenly magnates. They immediately lowered their heads, not daring to speak.
Who else but me? At this moment, the 7th prince fully demonstrated the meaning of these 4 words. Who could compete with the 7th prince? There was no one. All of the heavenly elites, including Duan Wuhan, had gloomy complexions. They knew that the divine embryo body had already left them. When they thought about how the saintess had fallen into the hands of the 7th prince, they felt as if their hearts were being cut apart by a knife. The surrounding people were also extremely shocked. Numerous exclamations of surprise continued to resound. This guy is really domineering. The Sword of Freedom martial god said solemnly.
Then, he stared at the treasures of the 7th prince and subconsciously licked his lips, because those treasures were so precious that even he was moved. If the 7th prince did not have a strong background, he might have snatched them. Next, he also looked at Lin Ling in the distance. He knew that Lin Ling was probably very dispirited at this moment.
After all, in terms of status and background, Lin Ling was defeated. He could only watch the beauty leave with his own eyes. However, since the start of the status competition, people had subconsciously ignored Lin Ling again. The main reason was that compared to those famous people, Lin Ling did not have a strong background. Naturally, he would not have the golden fleece flower to buy any treasures. The Sword of Freedom martial god also began to search for Lin Ling.
However, when he looked carefully, his eyes could not help but twitch fiercely.
This was because when the heavenly tycoons were fighting for the treasures, Lin Ling had somehow arrived beside an Yuer. Furthermore, the two of them were whispering and chatting happily. It was as if they were watching a clown competing with each other. Fuck me, this kid. Damn. The Sword of Freedom martial god was dumbfounded. That kid is too bold. Of course, after the 7th prince crushed all the heavenly tycoons, the crowd also shifted their attention to an Yuer. In their opinion, an Yuer should be tempted by the treasures too. However, the moment they saw it, they were all dumbfounded.
That was because the shameless young man had appeared beside an Yuer again. He was holding the saintess' hand and helping her put on a set of blue armor.
Most importantly, the saintess did not reject his offer. Speaking of which, does that kid even know the rules of the bridal escort ceremony? Everyone's heart was pounding. They knew that the kid was definitely going to receive the wrath of the heavenly tycoons. Especially the 7th prince. At this moment, the 7th prince smiled proudly. After defeating all the heavenly tycoons, he turned around and looked at the saintess with a smile. As expected, he was enraged too. How dare you? Roar! A furious roar burst out from his mouth. His boundary force rumbled as if he was going to kill Lin Ling. The roar attracted everyone's attention to Lin Ling. The entire ancient city fell silent. The rules of the bridal escort ceremony were to select the participants. Currently, the 7th prince was the winner.
According to the rules, he should be the one to hold the saintess' hand and bring her home.
Not the kid who disobeyed the rules. Idiot. Ah! Duan Wuhan was startled too. He then laughed coldly. He assumed that Lin Ling had lost his mind. He must have lost his mind and forcibly held the saintess' hand because he knew he was no match for the 7th prince. However, could that change the outcome? It was obviously impossible. Do you know what you're doing? The saintess is mine. Roar! The 7th prince took a big step forward and shouted angrily. His voice finally interrupted the conversation between Lin Ling and an Yuer. Lin Ling also looked at the crowd. Previously, he had seen them fighting and ignored him again. Therefore, he was too lazy to care about them. Let them fight. He, Lin Ling, was going to catch up with senior sister Yuer. Now that everyone was looking at him, Linling knew that it was time for him to make a move. A domineering aura quietly emanated from his body.
His gaze swept over the crowd, and he said indifferently, "I've never understood.
The Holy Maiden and I love each other, and we're in love with each other. Why do you want to separate us, and even organize this wedding ceremony? Isn't this the same as breaking up a pair of lovebirds? Could it be that all couples in this world were like this? They loved each other but couldn't be together because of reality?" The voice drifted out like an invisible wind. The seventh prince was stunned. He didn't get angry again. Instead, he laughed. It was a mocking laugh. The crowd was also stunned. Then, they all laughed disdainfully. Chapter 39-38. This is my moment. In this world, strength was everything.
If one wanted to be with the person they loved, then one needed to have the corresponding strength and status.
As for the blue-robed young man, he obviously didn't. He even said these words because he knew he was going to lose, so he found these excuses in an attempt to use love to cover up his incompetence. You're trash and you're blaming others. How can a trash like you talk about love? Many people began to curse. However, Linling acted as if he didn't hear them. He continued indifferently, "You don't like her at all. You're only interested in her divine body. What's ironic is that this group of toads are righteously saying that they love her and are moved by her." Toad? Hearing this, the Qianhao clan was enraged. This useless guy didn't even have a single treasure. He was weak and useless. How dare he call them toads?
"Haha, you can hide it all you want, you pauper." The seventh prince could not help but laugh out loud, his eyes full of contempt.
The blue-robed youth wanted to marry the Holy Maiden empty-handed. This was simply a joke to him. He believed that no one would agree. On the contrary, everyone felt even more disdain towards the blue-robed youth. What are you laughing at? Do you know where she came from? Do you know her birthday? Do you know what she likes? You don't know anything. You think you can move her heart with some treasures.
Linling said indifferently when he saw the seventh prince laughing.
I don't know anything, but I have a treasure. The seventh prince was still smiling, but his aura was overbearing. There was only one reason. I'm richer than you, I'm more capable, and I have a higher status. That's enough. A so-called poor loser like you still wants to fight over a woman with me? You really don't know your limits. That's right. Treasures are enough. Do you have any? You can only take out one set of armor? How embarrassing. Many Qianhao clan members also laughed mockingly. Although they had lost, at least they had treasures that were much better than Linling's. Hearing this, Linling finally shook his head. A bunch of filthy people. No wonder so many couples in the world have been separated. It was originally pure love, but it has been polluted by these things. All that is left is profit. Therefore, it is even more impossible for me to hand over the saintess. I want to protect her for the rest of my life. As soon as the last sentence was spoken, the surrounding voices suddenly became much softer. In the crowd, the Three Leaves elder suddenly laughed.
Compared to the treasures, he suddenly liked the youth's sincerity.
The great elder also laughed.
He knew that if the Holy Maiden were to marry the seventh prince, it would not bring her happiness.
She would only be used.
However, if she were to marry that brat, it would be true happiness.
Of course, there weren't many people who had such thoughts. On the contrary, more people couldn't help but burst into laughter. Not hand over the Holy Maiden? Just him? Ha ha. However, just as the crowd was laughing, Linling suddenly laughed as well. A heroic, domineering, and magnanimous aura emanated from him.
It was as if he had vented all the gloominess in his heart.
I know that you filthy people will never understand. Therefore, I do not intend to take the Holy Maiden away by force. Because, I, Linling, cannot do it. More importantly, I want the whole world to know that the Holy Maiden is my woman. Linling took a step forward and enunciated each word clearly. His long hair and blue robes fluttered wildly. Many people frowned. Actually, let me tell you. I have been waiting for this moment for a long time. It is not to prove how great I am, but to let my wife and Xueqi return home openly.
Why have I been waiting for a long time?
Because I want to take the Holy Maiden away in front of all of you. I want you to know that filthy people like you will never have the right to take my wife away. Shameless people like you can only watch from afar.
How ironic.
More importantly, I want to tell you that this moment is my moment. Lin Ling roared loudly. His powerful aura shook the ancient dragon wasteland, causing the wind and clouds to surge.
At this moment, he was like an unsheathed divine sword, revealing its sharpness.
Come, bring the betrothal gifts. Following Lin Ling's loud shout, his entire person seemed to rise infinitely. He looked down upon the heavens, his head touching the sky, and his feet stepping on the ground. With his command, thousands of troops came to meet him. The army was pressing in. The God Extermination Alliance had arrived. From all directions of the ancient city, a vast and mighty crowd slowly walked over. In their hands was an item. Treasure light soared into the sky, and spiritual energy gushed out. 100,000 people, each with a treasure. At this moment, no one was unmoved. 10,000 silkworms golden alms bowl, divine wood alms bowl, purple bamboo basket, lone dragon zen skill, scarlet jade skill, soul-absorbing bottle, 7 treasures amethyst worship, 6 true essence gourd, red desire pouch, 9 heavens primordial yang ruler, laser ruler. When those people came closer, an old man spoke in shock. The divine weapons category had obviously been bought out. Entangling sacred steps, boundless tyrannical art, bone-eroding dragon finger, ferocious tiger demon fist, burning city dragon spear art, ice silkworm demon transformation, flying swallow Buddha killing technique. Those Tianhao all sat on the ground in fright, their faces pale as they muttered to themselves. The divine weapons were bought out again. Immortal fruit, Feng Yun immortal fruit, Lin Ling vine fruit, scarlet flame immortal fruit, blue spirit fruit, ice spirit fruit, 3-leaf golden Ganoderma, elixir of the North Sea, 9-leaf Ganoderma. Another old monster roared in horror. Although that group of people did not buy out the rare treasures category, they had already bought more than 60% of them. Could it be that that group of people are the ones who caused the commotion in God's shop? Everyone held their breaths, and their hearts roared. There was even a moment when many powerful martial artists almost took action to snatch the items. However, they also saw that those 100,000 people were all experts with terrifying auras. In the end, they did not dare to act rashly. That is one of the remaining overlords of the ancient dragon wasteland, the God-slaying alliance. Finally, the leader of the overlords said each word. The entire city was in an uproar. The God-slaying alliance was one of the most mysterious overlords. It was said that they had countless leaders and experts, including the former overlords, the Genesis Alliance and the Serpent Clan. The God-slaying alliance was also a miracle in the ancient dragon wasteland, because they were the representatives of the overlords who grew from weak to overlords. In the end, they even destroyed Fengyun Tower. They had been hiding in the ancient dragon wasteland, but no one dared to underestimate them, not even the Seventh Emperor Alliance. But now, this terrifying overlord had finally surfaced. Greetings, great leader. While everyone was still in shock, all the members of the God-Slayer Alliance suddenly stopped in the sky above the ancient city. Then, they let out a loud roar that shook the 9 heavens. Great leader? This time, everyone was shocked.
They followed the gaze of the God-slaying alliance and fixed their eyes on a young man in a blue robe. And he was the young man beside the saintess.
It's him. Yes. The shocked gazes of everyone silently transformed into disbelief, and their expressions were extremely complicated. There was terror, surprise, dejection, and disappointment. Chapter 39-39. Evil Intentions. In the ancient dragon wasteland, everyone already knew that the God-Slayer Alliance had a leader behind the scenes. This leader was extremely powerful and had gathered countless experts to sweep through the ancient dragon wasteland. He had turned the God-Slayer Alliance from a small existence into a great overlord step by step. Therefore, everyone was curious as to what kind of person had such an ability. And now, all the mysteries had been solved. It was Lin Ling. This guy is the great leader of the God-Slayer Alliance? Endless ripples arose in the unrestrained sword martial god's heart. Clearly, he did not expect that the young man he met in Plentiful City back then was actually so terrifying. And now, in terms of status, Lin Ling wasn't inferior to anyone. Who could compete with him in terms of background? This moment was clearly Lin Ling's glorious moment. How can this guy have so many golden fleece flower? Compared to everyone else's shock, the seventh prince was undoubtedly the one who was truly astounded. This was because only he knew the terrifying value of the treasure that Lin Ling brought. The divine weapon category, the divine category, and more than half of the wondrous treasure category. He had even bought the first category of divine legacy treasures. The amount of golden fleece flowers required for this was something that could not be obtained without over 100 million golden fleece flowers. Previously, he had been arrogant in front of Lin Ling. At this moment, he felt as if he had given himself a ruthless slap. Liar, this is fake. While everyone was still in disbelief, the seventh prince suddenly let out a loud roar and interrupted everyone's shock. That's right, it's definitely fake. Lin Ling. Oh Lin Ling, I didn't expect you to be so shameless as to use fake things to trick people. Duan Wuhan also pointed at Lin Ling and let out a sharp cry, because he also couldn't accept the reality in front of him. After all, he knew Lin Ling's background better than anyone else. Lin Ling was just a student of the Snow Wind Academy and was born in the Qing province. How could he have the ability to summon the God-slaying alliance? Moreover, he believed that if Lin Ling could do it, then he could do it too. If all of this is true, how about you eat feces again? Lin Ling also looked at Duan Wuhan and Duan Wuhan. He naturally knew that these two would definitely not admit to it. However, no matter how they quibbled, in front of the powerful facts, they would only embarrass themselves. Do you dare? Lin Ling's aura was aggressive. Duan Wuhan's pupils constricted, and he didn't dare to speak. Young master, don't be afraid of him, we believe in you. However, the powerhouses of the Duan family, who didn't know the truth, actually supported Duan Wuhan. Not only that, but they were also fiercely glaring at Lin Ling. This made Duan Wuhan almost curse out loud. If you have the ability, go eat feces. Although he was tough with Lin Ling, in reality, he was also a little afraid of Lin Ling. Do you dare? Next, Lin Ling looked at the seventh prince. The seventh prince's eyes were as cold as a sword. He was different from Duan Wuhan. He had never been in contact with Lin Ling, so he had strong confidence in himself. I was born in the purple chi since I was a child. Since I was a child, I have known the great Tao of the universe, I know the principles of fate, and I know the cause and effect of heaven and earth. So I know that your treasures are fake. He said each word with incomparable confidence. Because he really didn't believe that Lin Ling would have 300 million golden fleece flowers, and because he was very clear that the number of golden fleece flowers in the entire ancient dragon wasteland was definitely not 300 million. At best, it was only 100 million. This was what another trial taker had told him, and it was also something that the god had inadvertently revealed. He believed the words of the god 10,000 times. Unfortunately, he didn't know that the ancient dragon wasteland really didn't have 300 million golden fleece flowers, but Lin Ling bought them at half price. This meant that he only spent 100 million golden fleece flowers, but bought 300 million treasures. Bullshit! At this moment, Lin Ling also shouted at the seventh prince. His words made the seventh prince furious. This Lin Ling actually dared to scold him? Seventh prince, these treasures are all real. At this moment, a large number of elders in the immortal temple had already flown out to check the treasures. Following that, they shouted in disbelief. Moreover, some of the old monsters around also flew out to check, and their faces turned serious. This made the seventh prince's body tremble. His eyes widened, unable to believe this result. How could this be? How could this be? He kept shaking his head in his heart. Weren't you born in the purple chi since you were a child? I think you grew up in a cesspool. Also, didn't you know the great Tao of the universe since you were a child, you know the principles of fate, and you know the principles of karma? In my opinion, you're just a dog's mouth that can't spit out ivory. While the seventh prince was still in shock, Lin Ling also spoke indifferently. Every word was like a sword that stabbed into the seventh prince's heart, deeply humiliating him. As for Duan Wuhan, his face was ashen, and his eyes were gloomy. Lin Ling, there are a lot of treasures. Today, Lin Ling must not be allowed to escape again. Moreover, he must snatch all the treasures. Because with Lin Ling's treasures, even the immortal temple's saintess divine fetus body would not be needed. No, he should snatch all of it. The more Duan Wuhan thought about it, the more his eyes burned. He quietly notified the others. Following his notification, A large number of experts arrived from a distant place. There were more of them than the God-Slayer Alliance. This change was also noticed by the people in the ancient city. Their faces changed greatly, and then they looked around. Suddenly, their eyes fell on Duan Wuhan. Could this be Duan Wuhan's idea? It's the Heaven Alliance. Some experts narrowed their eyes. It seems that the Heaven Alliance is not going to abide by the rules. They're using tyrannical means to seize everything. The Heaven Alliance is the strongest. They have 3 million people. The God-Slayer Alliance can't compare at all. Many people had guessed Duan Wuhan's intention. 3 million experts had arrived. This meant that the God-Slayer Alliance's treasures would be difficult to protect. Even the saintess of the Immortal Temple would be snatched away. This guy. The great elder of the Immortal Temple was naturally not a fool. He was so angry that he cursed loudly. That guy was too shameless. He couldn't compete with others, so he used such despicable means. Quickly tell him to leave. Take all the treasures and leave. Subconsciously, the great elder of the Immortal Temple transmitted his voice to Yuer's beautiful eyes stared at the distant sky, but she had obviously guessed something. She hurried to Lin Ling's side, held Lin Ling's hand, and was just about to remind him. It's okay. They're just a bunch of clowns. However, before Yuer could speak, Lin Ling had already replied indifferently. His words were full of confidence. But he's already harboring evil intentions. Yuer was still very worried. Believe me. Lin Ling turned his head and glanced at Yuer. Those clear eyes were as calm as an ancient well without ripples. In the end, Yuer nodded gently because she and Lin Ling had grown up together. She knew that Lin Ling had already seen such a big scene. In the wind and rain, Lin Ling did not know how many times he had broken through. Lin Ling, there are so many treasures. Chapter 39-40. The Sky Alliance had arrived. Yes, are you not convinced? Lin Ling replied with a smile. However, with your knowledge and experience, this should be the first time you've seen so many treasures in your life. Hee, look at these treasures now. It's good to broaden your horizons. You can brag about it when you go home. Duan Wuhan could hear that Lin Ling was mocking him for his insignificance. He nodded his head heavily and stopped talking because he was going to shock Lin Ling and even make him regret it. Using treasures to suppress Duan Wuhan? These treasures would all belong to the Sky Alliance. Could it be that this guy hasn't realized it yet? The 7th prince's eyes flickered slightly because he found that Lin Ling didn't run away. Instead, he had the leisure to reprimand Duan Wuhan. Could it be that he didn't realize that the people of the Sky Alliance had come with bad intentions? Regarding this, the 7th prince naturally wouldn't remind him. He was happy to see it and even looked forward to seeing Lin Ling regret and beg for mercy. Unfortunately, Lin Ling had been in contact with Duan Wuhan for so many times. How could he not know what Duan Wuhan was thinking? Lin Ling even had a countermeasure for this. The leader of the God-Slayer Alliance, I've heard so much about you. However, at this moment, a voice suddenly broke the silence. Before the experts of the Sky Alliance arrived, a middle-aged man suddenly walked toward Lin Ling with a smile. It's the Zizai Martial God. Many people's eyes lit up immediately. Senior Martial God, I've heard so much about you. Lin Ling's eyes flickered, but he immediately understood the intention of the Zizai Martial God. He immediately cupped his hands and bowed. He knew that the Zizai Martial God wanted to support the God-Slayer Alliance and fight against the Sky Alliance together. The leader of the God-Slayer Alliance is so charming. Many people also noticed the intention and said in amazement. Duan Wuhan was stunned and then gritted his teeth. That old man, Zizai Sword, is courting death? Isn't he going against the Sky Alliance openly? Then, he sneered and looked forward to it even more. Even though the alliance was powerful, it was an alliance of the Duan clan, the new heavenly court, and Miao Xin's true lineage. Why would they be afraid of the alliance? However, as soon as this thought appeared in his mind, a clear voice rang out. The reason it was clear was because this voice was very refreshing and carried the vigor of a young man. I didn't expect that the great leader of the God-Slayer Alliance would be so young. He's really young and promising. He's so much better than those trash who rely on their families. Following this,
A young man wearing a clean white robe and holding a long spear in his hand slowly walked toward them from the ancient city. The young man did not look old. Moreover, he was full of energy. As he walked, he gave off a fierce aura. As for his strength, it was extremely ferocious. He was actually a martial god. The most important thing was the spear in his hand. It was a silver spear with red tassels on it. It was as divine as a dragon. That's the 100 Victories spear. Could he be? Someone suddenly exclaimed in shock. The 7th prince's face turned ugly. He looked at the white-robed young man angrily and said, "Wuahaunan, what is the meaning of this?" "Hee, 7th prince, don't think that you're so powerful. Others may be afraid of you, but I, Wuahaunan, am not." The young man smiled faintly. Although his words seemed casual, they carried a boundless aura of sharpness. He had said that he was not afraid of the 7th prince in front of so many people. In the current ancient dragon wasteland, other than Lin Ling, he was the second person to do so. Moreover, both of them were so young. The young man walked toward Lin Ling step by step. Then, he cupped his hands at Lin Ling. "This is..." Lin Ling was also surprised. This was because he realized that the young man was extremely powerful. Most importantly, he looked as young as himself. This person has a divine fetus. The giant ghost beside him quietly transmitted his voice. This caused Lin Ling's heart to rumble. An expert. It seemed that he was still a frog in a well. He had thought that his strength and age were at the top of the world. However, the young man in front of him was not much weaker than him. "Wuahaunan." The white-robed young man smiled at Lin Ling and said, "The great leader of the Tiandi League." The moment he said this, the ancient city exploded. The only remaining overlords in the ancient dragon wasteland were the Heaven Alliance, the Immortal Demon Alliance, the 7th Emperor Alliance, the Unrestrained Sword Alliance, the God Slayer Alliance, and the equally mysterious Tiandi League. These alliances had gone through the baptism of wind and rain. All of them were extremely powerful, and their great leaders were dragons among men. However, today, the Tiandi League, which was as mysterious as the God Slayer Alliance, had also surfaced. Moreover, their great leader was also so young. This was obviously a rising star that was as terrifying as the God Slayer Alliance. Everything was as the great leader had said. Among the remaining overlords, the only great leaders who had started from scratch were him and Lin Ling. They could not compare to Duan Wuhan and the 7th prince. This was because their alliance was the strongest overlord from the beginning. They did not need to put in any effort at all. "It's an honor to meet you at last." Lin Ling was shocked again. He immediately bowed and looked at him inquisitively. Lin Ling was also very polite to this overlord. The main reason was that the other party was very polite to him. With Lin Ling's temperament, he naturally would not neglect the other party. However, what made Lin Ling suspicious was why the other party had come out. "Hee, I don't get along with the new heavenly court. Therefore, I'm on your side." Wuahaunan smiled and stated his purpose for coming. Could it be that the Tiandi League has also joined the God Slayer Alliance? This means that the God Slayer Alliance, the Unrestrained Sword Alliance, and the Tiandi League have become allies? Seeing this, everyone held their breaths. 3 overlords joining forces. This was an extremely rare thing. Moreover, they had joined forces for Lin Ling alone. This Lin Ling's charm was too great. Compared to everyone's surprise, Duan Wuhan had already sensed it. This was because the Heaven Alliance and the Tiandi League had actually clashed many times in the ancient dragon wasteland. They could be considered old rivals. However, it had to be said that although the Tiandi League did not have many members, each of them was an elite. This had led to them not being able to bite down on this tough bone until now. Now, the Tiandi League and the God Slayer Alliance had joined forces. Both of them were thorns that gave the Heaven Alliance headaches. It was obviously not as easy for the Heaven Alliance to destroy the other party. Obviously, he did not expect things to take so many twists and turns. At the same time, 3 million experts had arrived. There were experts from the Duan family, the new heavenly court, and the boundary masters from Miao Shin's true teachings. They surrounded the ancient city. A strong murderous aura quietly filled the air. "Lin Ling, long time no see." Chapter 39-41. Second Wind Under the Heavens. "It doesn't matter if I see a slut like you or not.
Lin Ling also sneered and looked at those enemies. He didn't expect things to turn out like this. However, 3 million experts were truly terrifying. The reason being that the weakest among them was a peak martial progenitor, and most of them were half martial god realm experts. To be able to mobilize such a large number of experts, only the 3 great alliances could do so. Murderous aura quietly filled the ancient city. A great battle was about to break out. If that's the case, then let's stand on this side. At this moment, the Immortal Demon Alliance also made a decision. Of course, most of them were from the Immortal Temple. The old demon from the Great Devil sect changed his expression and left coldly, walking towards the 7th Emperor Alliance. It was obvious that the Great Devil sect and Lin Ling had a grudge against each other. On top of that, the Great Devil sect didn't think highly of the God-slaying alliance. Naturally, they wouldn't stand on the same side as them. For a time, the 2 powerful forces were divided into 2 sides. One side was led by the 7th Prince, and behind him were 3 million experts. The other side was led by Lin Ling. On his left stood the white-robed youth, on his right stood the unfettered sword martial god, and not far behind him was the Immortal Temple. His aura was not weak at all. Many people in the distance swallowed their saliva. They never thought that things would turn out like this. Looks like the ancient dragon desolate body has split the world into 2. Right at this moment, the 7th Prince's voice drifted out silently, and it actually carried a wisp of excitement. Because the world was indeed divided into 2. Great leader of the God-Slayer Alliance, this wedding ceremony isn't over yet. I admit that you've won in the talent selection, and I admit that you've won in the treasure selection. However, I've won in the identity selection, and I've won twice as much as you. Therefore, we'll end things in a tie. The 7th Prince looked at Lin Ling and said indifferently. His words were undoubtedly twisting words and forcing logic. This was because Lin Ling had won 2 out of the 3 rounds. How could he, the 7th Prince, have the face to say that it was a tie? Oh. Lin Ling smiled, revealing a suspicious look. The 7th Prince chuckled softly when he saw Lin Ling's expression. His smile seemed to contain a sense of relief. However, his last sentence suddenly turned solemn. Let me tell you, my status is not something you can compare to, because I am a trial taker. As soon as he finished speaking, it was as if endless light was blooming from his body at the same time. Behind him, it was as if the blessings of the gods and Buddhas had appeared, and the power of the gods filled the air. Challenger! Ripples quietly appeared in the entire city. Many people's pupils immediately trembled. Clearly, this was the first time they had heard of this identity. As for the others, they already knew the identity of the 7th Prince. Some of them sighed, while others sneered. Many people knew that the 7th Prince had won from the very beginning. In the ancient dragon desolate land, no one dared to provoke him. Even if they defeated him, they would not dare to kill him. Because killing him was tantamount to provoking a god. How could a mortal oppose a god? Aren't you surprised? The 7th Prince enjoyed the respectful gazes of the crowd. He also looked at Lin Ling. At this moment, he almost looked up to the sky and roared, as if he wanted to vent the grievances in his heart. Indeed. Lin Ling nodded. However, he already knew the origin of the 7th Prince, so in reality, he was not surprised at all. Why are you talking so much nonsense with him? 7th Prince, let's work together to eliminate him. Seeing that today was the best opportunity, Duan Wuhan immediately shouted coldly. He was afraid that things would change if he delayed. Moreover, this was the first time he had summoned 3 million elite experts. This made him excited, as if he had become the god who summoned the 9 states. Lin Ling, let's see how you escape today. Then, he looked at Lin Ling mockingly. 3 million people besieged Lin Ling. Lin Ling would definitely be killed until not even his bones were left. Ha ha ha. Thinking of this, he finally could not help but look up to the sky and laugh. It was as if the entire battle was under his control. As for the 7th Prince, he had already released most of his depression by announcing his origin. At this moment, seeing that he was about to make a move, he could not help but laugh. Because if they killed this group of people in front of them, then all the treasures would belong to them, including the divine embryo body. No, there should also be the god's legacy treasure. Lin Ling, oh Lin Ling, I really should thank you. When the 7th Prince thought of the endless treasures, he immediately cupped his hands and bowed to Lin Ling. Lin Ling raised his eyebrows in an instant. Thank me for what? Thank you for your treasures, because I really couldn't get so many golden fleece flower. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have had the chance to buy those treasures. You tell me, shouldn't I thank you? The seventh prince touched his chin and smiled. After saying this, he and Duan Wuhan looked at each other because these treasures were to be divided equally. Speaking of treasures, Duan Wuhan was also excited as if he had been injected with chicken blood. After getting Lin Ling's treasures, not only did his strength increase greatly, but his reputation in the Duan family also increased greatly. Because he had finally gained face for the Duan family once. You should thank me, you should thank me. Duan Wuhan immediately cupped his hands to Lin Ling. Their actions of thanking were obviously more of sarcasm. Ha ha ha. The 3 million people in the sky also reacted, and then they all laughed. That laughter went straight to the 9th heaven. Duan Wuhan, these treasures, I want 60%. Okay, but the divine embryo body belongs to me, and the god's legacy belongs to me, and the rest belongs to you, how about it? In your dreams, the divine embryo body and the god's legacy, the one who gets the divine embryo body gets 60%, and the one who gets the god's legacy gets 40%, how about it? Next, the 7th prince and Duan Wuhan had already begun to divide the treasures. Seeing this, the carefree sword martial god, Wu Yue, Haonan, and the great elder of the immortal temple had already condensed their boundary essence and were ready to fight to the death. At this point, they had no choice but to fight. Because even if they retreated, the other party would destroy them. The other party obviously wanted to unify the ancient dragon wasteland. As for the Heaven Alliance and the 7th Imperial Alliance, they obviously also had enmity. Otherwise, they would not have stood out to support Lin Ling. 3 million people, I'm afraid that this battle will make my hands go numb. Wu Yue Haonan said word by word. The carefree sword martial god nodded. Although no one there was a match for him, the other party had too many people, and their strength was not weak. He could indeed kill until his hands went numb. If you really want to kill, let's do it next time. Today is my wedding day, and it's not good to see blood. But at this moment, Lin Ling also said with a smile, his expression calm. These words also made the carefree sword martial god's pupils constrict. Kill next time? Now, do they have a choice? Unless they kneel down and admit their mistakes and submit to the other party would not let them go at all. Lin Ling, have you seen the situation clearly? The great elder could not help but ask. I have seen it clearly. I don't know what those 2 clowns are talking about. As for the 3 million people, they are here to celebrate for me.